And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, with Clarence Thomas away due to an illness, could someone finally TP his office? And will my son be discouraged from playing recreational league soccer when he realizes he can't boot his opponent's shins into oblivion? And now, the podcast host who always plays fair, unless, of course, there's a viral video involved, Pete Dominic!
Yes, indeed! You are right, as you always are, about me, Pete Cohen. Thank you very much for getting us started, my friend. Always appreciated. It is Monday, the 21st of March, everybody. Happy spring. Spring began yesterday. How do you feel? It's my favorite time of year. I hope that you like it. If you're into gardening, I have a Facebook group that I started years ago when I was back at the old place, and we've got a gardening group. I highly recommend you join us. It's titled the Stand Up Garden Group. If you're into Facebook and groups and gardening, make a request, and we'll welcome you into that community as well. I spent a lot of time outside over the weekend and got a lot done and feel great about all of the things I got done. How about you? I hope you had a good weekend. I am always happy to hear from you. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email address. I always hear from listeners in any number of ways, and I love being a part of this growing community. Welcome to it. If you haven't subscribed to the stand-up community, to the podcast with a paid subscription and little as $5, do it now. Let's go. Come on, standupwithpete.com. I've got an awesome show for you almost every Monday. I catch up with Maura Quint today. No exception, another great conversation with Maura. Funny, ridiculous, and smart every week. Then I have a almost hour and a half conversation with Eric Segall, the latter half of which is a vehement argument about speech issues and, quote, cancel culture and students shouting down campus speakers who've been invited at college campuses. We had a great conversation, and it got argumentative at times, but it was great. We love each other, and I think you're going to, well, I hope you're going to like it. Eric Segall, Maura Quint on the show today. Spring has sprung. I hope you're well. I've got the news for you, as I do every Monday through Thursday right here on Stand Up, the best daily news and analysis podcast you will find anywhere in podcast land. Tell your friends. Let's do the last 24, really the last 72, because it's the Monday show. What happened over the weekend? Did I mention that spring is here? Spring, one of the 2 days out of the year, the spring equinox, the other day being the autumnal equinox in September, when the Earth's axis is tilted neither toward nor away from the sun, resulting in roughly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness almost everywhere on Earth. So that is the most important story from the weekend, according to me, of course. Then I think you have to talk about Ukraine. You have to talk about COVID. You have to talk about all the other issues as well. And that is what I will do here on the news dump. But first, I do want to mention, I saw this reported in a lot of places. I don't know how relevant it is or not. I'm not even familiar with this DC-based institute, the study of war. But I did see the New York Times, CNN, a bunch of Sunday shows referencing it. But they have concluded that, quote, Ukrainian forces have defeated the initial Russian campaign of this war. They published this assessment over the weekend. They write, the doctrinally sound Russian response, the assessment concludes, would be for Russian forces to pause and regroup instead of, quote, continuing to feed small collections of reinforcements into an ongoing effort to keep the current campaign alive. United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin made similar comments in Bulgaria on Saturday. He said, I think Russia envisioned that they would move rapidly and very quickly to seize the capital. They have not been able to do that. So that study and the tide of the conflict, the invasion, seems to be, if not turning, at least stagnated or stalemated, if you will. Okay, now on to some other headlines related to Vladimir Putin's awful invasion into Ukraine. Russia apparently has been using hypersonic missiles. They reportedly travel at 10 times the speed of sound. They're using them in western Ukraine, apparently. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, Russian president unveiled the missiles in 2018, but this is the first time Russian forces have admitted to using them in combat. The Chinese president called for peace in Ukraine during a 2-hour call with President Biden on Friday. Russian strikes destroy Ukrainian aircraft repair plant in Lviv on Friday with 6 cruise missiles, apparently. Poland to formally propose a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. European politicians are pushing for and extending the Nobel Peace Prize deadline to nominate the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. The Prime Minister of the UK again being criticized, this time for comparing Brexit to the Brexit vote to the war in Ukraine. Well, the former Belgian Prime Minister called the comparison insane, while the leader of the UK Liberal Democrats called it an insult to Ukraine. Mariupol officials, the city in Ukraine, claiming thousands of Ukrainians have been forcibly taken to Russia and potentially being put in camps. On Saturday and Sunday, Ukrainian president invoked his emergency powers to suppress several Ukrainian political parties and implement a unified information policy. In a speech he delivered yesterday, he announced a temporary ban on any activity by 11 political parties and also combined all national TV channels, the program content of which consists mainly of information analytical programs, into a single information platform of strategic communication, which is a really interesting development. All right, there's several headlines related to Putin's invasion into Ukraine, and now let's get to some sound. Let's hear from President Zelensky. He sat down with CNN's Fareed Zakaria yesterday. And here he is through a translator. He said he's ready for negotiations with Putin. He'd been ready for the last 2 years. And if these attempts fails, it would mean that this is a third world war. Here he is, President Zelensky, via translator to CNN's Fareed Zakaria.
President Biden has called Vladimir Putin a war criminal. And yet you have called for negotiations with him. Will it be hard? Will it be painful for you to have to sit down with Putin were he to agree and negotiate with him?
I'm ready for negotiations with him. I was ready over the last 2 years. And I think that without negotiations, we cannot end this war. I think that all the people who think that this dialogue is shallow and that it is not going to resolve anything, they just don't understand that this is very valuable. If there is just 1% chance for us to stop this war, I think that we need to take this chance. We need to do that. I can tell you about the result of this negotiations. In any case, we are losing people on a daily basis, innocent people on the ground. Russian forces have come to exterminate us, to kill us, and we have demonstrated the dignity of our people and our army, that we are able to deal a powerful blow. We are able to strike back. But unfortunately, our dignity is not going to preserve the lives. So I think that we have to use any format, any chance in order to have a possibility of negotiating, possibility of talking to Putin. But if these attempts fail, that would mean that this is a third world war.
There you go. For more of that, check out CNN's Fareed Zakaria. And now let's go over to NBC. Meet the Press. Yesterday, Chuck Todd had Senator Chris Murphy on, and this questioning annoys me and tries to sound so smart. And by the way, if you saw this the other day, this whole war criminal thing, Biden calling Putin a war criminal, someone asked him a question, is Putin a war criminal? After the press conference, after the signing of the Violence Against Women's Act, there's a bunch of reporters, and a reporter asked him, is Putin a war criminal? And he hemmed and hawed. He's like, nah, what? And then he turned around and came back and was like, you know what? Yeah, he is a war criminal. And so then everybody decided to act like he had made some pronouncement, that he had put out a document, a statement, that his spokeswoman was saying that. He was responding to a reporter's question. And you listen to here, Chuck Todd trying to hang this around, like just trying to make a huge deal of this. How are you going to negotiate with a war criminal? I mean, you they didn't negotiate with Slobodan Milosevic like 1999. He isn't Vladimir Putin. It isn't now, and it's not a good point, but here it is.
President Biden called Vladimir Putin a war criminal this week. There are a lot of people that agree with that assessment, but question whether the president himself should have personalized it. Where are you in this?
Well, I don't think you can do anything other than call Vladimir Putin a war criminal. He is. I mean,
it's so frustrating. Of course he is. It's just a dumb question. Of course he is. Of course Senator Chris Murphy is going to give the right answer. There's a legal definition of it, and we should wait for that. But I mean, come on. This is politics. You can say this kind of stuff. Americans were war criminals in Afghanistan and Iraq. We should be able to say that, too. Back to Chris Murphy.
What he is doing right now, as we speak, targeting children, maternity wards, schools inside Ukraine, clearly crosses a line. And what we're seeing is
we're going to negotiate with a war criminal.
Yeah, but what we've seen,
that is what's difficult here, right? We didn't negotiate with Milosevic.
Well, listen, this is ultimately a decision that Zelensky is going to make. But listen, this is a moment where we need to come together in Washington around President Biden. President Biden is showing moral leadership, just like President Zelensky is showing moral leadership. I got a lot of Republican colleagues right now who are using their time to criticize President Biden, to vote against Ukraine aid on the floor of the House and the Senate. Well, President Biden is standing up there saying and doing the right thing. So I'm proud of President Biden for drawing a moral line against Vladimir Putin. I'd rather have my Republican colleagues supporting him rather than attacking him.
Well, there you go. Chris Murphy, probably my favorite senator. I think he is so articulate and so smart from Connecticut there. And now let's head over to CBS, another Sunday show. I listen to all the Sunday shows. I listen to the Face of the Nation, the Meet the Press, the This Week, the Velshi, the State of the Union on CNN. I don't usually listen to Fox News Sunday. I should, but I don't. But here it is. Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan had, I think, the most interesting interview of all the shows that I heard. And I heard a lot of really interesting things. I got a few more to play for you. I just thought this was probably the best booking. She booked the Chinese ambassador to the United States. His name is King Gang, Qingang, Gang. I don't know how to pronounce it, but he is, of course, the Chinese ambassador to the U.S., and she had him on to talk about Russia's Ukraine invasion and asked him, why can't you condemn this as an invasion? And he's like, God, don't be so naive. And he speaks pretty good English, and I thought this was real fascinating. I highly recommend you watch the whole almost 10-minute interview. Margaret Brennan, of course, no shrinking violet.
We are in no opinion. Russia amassed more than 150,000 troops at China's border.
Well, that's why we want.
Well, just to be clear,
to have a
China,
friendly, good neighborly relations with Russia.
But you would recognize that's not good, friendly, neighborly relations to put 150,000 troops on the border of a neighboring country and then to send those troops into that country.
Well,
in those circumstances, why can't you condemn this as an invasion?
Well, don't be naive. Condemnation.
It sounds naive to say that's not an invasion. It
doesn't solve the problem. I would be surprised if Russia will back down by condemnation. What is urgently
will they back down if your president asks Vladimir Putin to back down? Will your president ask Vladimir Putin to back down?
We have done so.
They rely
and we'll
on
continue to promote peace talks and urge the immediate fire. And condemnation only doesn't help. We need wisdom. We need wisdom, we need courage, and we need good diplomacy.
Well, Vladimir Zelensky says he would like to meet with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Zelensky's in a bunker. Vladimir Putin is at a political pro-war rally right now. You can't have diplomacy when it is one country, the only one country willing to actually negotiate.
China has good relations with Russia, has good relations with Ukraine, and China keeps close communications with the United States and with Europe. They enable China to reach to all parties' concerns in the crisis. So China's unique role, can help the peaceful settlement of the crisis.
Well, there you go. I thought that was an interesting and at times contentious interview, but Margaret Brennan, always prepared, always holds her own no matter her guest. And let's head over to the U.S. Senate, where Dick Durbin was responding to a question on ABC's This Week, I think, about this as well. This is a really important component and piece. The Chinese role, relationship with Russia. Will they support him? How will they support him? What will they rhetorically say? Here it is, Stephanopoulos, Durbin.
How about tougher economic sanctions right now, not only on Russia, but also potentially for China? We know that President Biden spoke with President Xi on Friday. It doesn't appear that China, at least not yet, is ready to back off their support for Putin.
President Xi has to decide his place in history and China's place in the world. If they are going to be part of Putin and his barbaric conduct in Ukraine, he's going to run the risk of discrediting his own nation. He has to think twice about that. And I think the president's most recent communication really put it on the line to him. That if he is going to secretly say he's not taking a position and then quietly go ahead and provide the resources that Putin needs, we're going to know it and we're going to report it.
There you go. We are going to know it and we're going to report it. That is Senator Dick Durbin. I think he's the number 2 senator, most powerful senator in the Democratic Senate. And now let's head over to, let's stay at ABC with This Week with George Stephanopoulos, because I really like this Russian television producer, Marina Avsyannikova, who protested Putin's war on the air. She was on with Stephanopoulos on ABC yesterday, and he asked her, what's your message for your boy Putin? What's your message for the West?
What is your message for President Putin? What is your message for the West?
With this action, I wanted to demonstrate to the world that not all Russian people believe the same. And I believe that many people, more than half of the people in Russia, are against the war. And the severe sanctions that the West is imposing on all of the people is probably a correct decision, but you must understand that not just the oligarchs and Putin's closest circle are suffering from these sanctions. Ordinary people, ordinary Russian citizens who are against the war are also being affected. And the first people who suffered from this actually were our 11-year-old daughter whose credit card was blocked and she couldn't have lunch at school. She couldn't pay for her lunch at school and was hungry. So I just wanted to show to the world that it's not just black and white in Russia. And I wanted to show to our Russian people that they need to think critically and analyze the information that is being presented to them critically.
Man, I thought that was a really interesting clip when I heard it, so I wanted to share that one with you as well. What a brave woman staying in Russia. I don't know how they let her out, by the way, of detention. Seems weird who they choose. I would like to know more about that, how that works. All right, well, that's all the headlines and sound I've got for you on Putin's invasion into Ukraine, obviously remaining the top story, though this week in the U.S. domestically, we are going to see the confirmation hearings begin for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she is, of course, it's worth noting, I think, one of the most scrutinized individuals in the entire legal profession, according to Ian Millhiser, real smart writer and legal commentator over at Vox.com, who writes, even before President Joe Biden nominated her to the Supreme Court, she faced 3 Senate confirmation hearings, one when she was named to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, a second time after she was nominated to a trial judgeship, and a third time when she was nominated in her current job as a federal appellate judge. Her Supreme Court nomination was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So it came as a pretty big surprise, or maybe it shouldn't be, when on Wednesday of last week, Senator Josh Hawley, last seen fist-bumping insurrectionist, Republican of Missouri, leveled a false and astonishing charge against Ketanji Brown Jackson, Judge Jackson, that she spent the last quarter decade advocating for and later using her position as a judge to protect child pornographers. Yes, Hawley tweeted, Judge Jackson has a pattern of letting child porn offenders off the hook for their appalling crimes, both as a judge and as a policymaker. She's been advocating for it since a law school. This goes beyond soft on crime. I'm concerned that this is a record that endangers our children. Of course, His broad allegation is false. It's been fact-checked over and over and over. It's an inflammatory charge, reminiscent of conspiracy theories such as QAnon and Pizzagate, which posit that prominent liberals are somehow a vast ring of pedophiles, and it's dangerous. And so Senator Hawley sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're going to hear from him this week, and if his public statements are any indication, it's likely that this asshole is going to spend his portion of the hearing berating Judge Jackson with allegations that she's somehow an ally of sex offenders. It's most likely inevitable, Ian Millhiser writes, in other words, that Hawley's attacks on Jackson will reach a wide audience. Well, here's a montage of senators on the Sunday shows answering questions about the confirmations hearing this week, including Dick Durbin pushing back on Hawley.
Justices get lifetime tenure, and before that happens, there needs to be a vigorous, rigorous vetting of their records, and there are things in Judge Jackson's record that are troubling.
Some Senate Republicans like Josh Hawley, who set out a Twitter series of tweets suggesting that Judge Jackson is somehow soft on child porn. It's been debunked.
Well, I'm not sure what it signals, but as far as Senator Hawley is concerned, here's the bottom line. He's wrong. He's inaccurate and unfair in his analysis.
Do you think Senator Hawley's attacks were fair?
Well, he's going to have his opportunity to question the judge, as will all of the members of the committee. The last time we had a hearing with Kavanaugh, he was accused of being a serial rapist when no evidence whatsoever.
But I asked her to defend the court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Breyer both publicly opposed court packing. That is, trying to increase the number of court members in order to get an outcome you like. That would have been an easy thing for her to do to defend the integrity of the court. She wouldn't do that.
I'm less concerned about her statements than I am about Chuck Schumer's statements. He said she's going to rule with empathy. A judge ought to be making decisions based on the law as written, not the way they feel about it. So he also said, check her record. And going through the record, there are some concerns that people have about her being perceived as soft on crime.
Judge Jackson has been scrutinized more than any person I can think of. This is her fourth time before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and 3 previous times she came through with flying colors and bipartisan support, the last time as soon as just last year.
All right, well, there's a mashup montage. John Barroso, no evidence whatsoever of any issues with Kavanaugh. No evidence whatsoever. What? Did that? Okay, don't get me started. Anyway, here is Elie Mystal. He was on Tiffany Cross's show on MSNBC over the weekend, and he took it much, much further, saying that Hawley is actually putting her in danger.
The simplest thing for Republicans would be to kind of have a normal, kind of above board hearing, let her be confirmed so she doesn't change the balance of power of the court anyway, and go back to talking about the things that work for them, you know, to go back to crying about gas prices or talking about Hunter Biden's laptop or whatever other thing counts as a Republican platform these days, because she is going to be confirmed and she is going to be well liked while she's confirmed, and she's not going to change the balance of power. So them going to the mattresses against her is kind of a waste of their time. But I don't want to let the Josh Hawley thing lie, because here's where I need the Democrats to step up, because when they try to smear her, I need the Democrats to get up there and defend her just as vociferously as Lindsey Graham defended alleged attempted rapist Brett Kavanaugh. Like, I need that level of energy from the Democrats, especially when they come at her with this trumped up alleged issues about her sentencing on for sex offenders. Because what Josh Hawley is doing, let's be very clear. What Josh Hawley is doing when he tries to do this is he's trying to get her killed. He is trying to get violence done against a Supreme Court nominee. And we know this because when these people go off making their ridiculous claims about child pornography, we know that some of their people show up violently to do stuff, as happened to the New Hampshire pizza parlor. And you know how I know that Josh Hawley knows what Pizzagate is all about? Because guess who's the judge who sentenced the Pizzagate guy? Right. Oh, that was Ketanji Brown Jackson. He sentenced the Pizzagate guy to 4 years in prison. His lawyer had asked for 18 months. The prosecutors actually asked for 4.5 years. So she was lenient. She was merciful to the Pizzagate guy. But they're mad at her for that. And so, like, that's where this stuff is coming from. And so you need to know where it's coming from. And Democrats need to know how to defend her from this stuff instead of letting her out there on her own.
All right, well, there are your audio clips on Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Wide range of opinions there, of course. And now let's get to COVID, huh? How about some COVID news? Haven't done that in a long time. But I saw some interesting stuff over the weekend. I got Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Sorry, smart cousin Darcy. I couldn't find any Michael Osterholm. But I got Gottlieb and Anthony Fauci from the Sunday shows. First, here's Scott Gottlieb on Face the Nation, CBS, saying he doesn't think that this BA2 COVID variant will lead to a big wave. He does predict there will be a pickup in infection if we don't take steps to provide those who are vulnerable.
I just need to get your perspective on what BA2, this new variant, means. Should we be concerned about a wave?
Well, look, I don't think we're going to see a big wave of infection, but we're going to see some uptick from where we are right now. Right now, we're at very low levels of infection. We have 9 cases per 100,000 people per day. Those are levels that we haven't seen since last June. There are about 20,000 people currently hospitalized. And I think we're going to continue to see low levels of infection through the summer. But before we get there, we're probably going to see some tick up of infection like the Europeans are seeing right now. Maybe not as pronounced. And there are indications that the UK is already peaking, but some increase in infections. And that's a result of BA2, which is probably 30 to 50% more transmissible than the Omicron variant that became prevalent here, as well as the lifting of mitigation. People are going out more, they're interacting more, and some declining immunity from people who were boosted a long time ago or infected a long time ago. We're relying on that immunity, and that immunity isn't as pronounced right now. So we are going to see an increase in infection. I think this is going to be a real test of whether or not we're able to live some semblance of normalcy and not reach back to the kind of mitigation that we relied on in the past. And I don't think we'll be doing that while still protecting the vulnerable. And so far right now, I don't know that we're taking all the steps we need to be taking to protect vulnerable people to weather this bump and potentially another surge heading into next fall.
All right, let's head back over to ABC, where George Stephanopoulos asked a very similar question to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
What's your take on this BA2 variant?
Well, as was said, it has a degree of transmission advantage over the original Omicron, but not multifold advantage. So it's about 50 to 60% or so more transmissible, which means ultimately over time, it might take over as the dominant variant. Clearly throughout the world, it's about 80+%, 85% of the isolate. In the United States, it's still somewhere around 30%. So it does have an increased transmission capability. However, when you look at the cases, they do not appear to be any more severe, and they do not appear to evade immune responses either from vaccines or prior infection. So the bottom line is we likely will see an uptick in cases as we've seen in the European countries, particularly the UK, where they've had the same situation as we've had now. They have the BA2. They have a relaxation of some of the restrictions, such as indoor masking, and there's a waning of immunity. Hopefully, we won't see a surge. I don't think we will. The easiest way to prevent that is to continue to get people vaccinated, and for those who have been vaccinated, to continue to get them boosted. So that's really where we stand right now. We can expect to see an increase, yes.
All right, and for the larger question, here is, again, Dr. Fauci with George Stephanopoulos.
How should we be taking advantage of this moment right now? I was struck by something Anne Ramoyne, a UCLA epidemiologist, told the New York Times this morning, who said we've been wearing rose-colored glasses instead of correcting our vision. Her point is that we should be much more proactive. Does she have a point? What more can we be doing to protect against another surge?
Well, I think she makes a very, very good point. I mean, we only still have about 65% of our population has been vaccinated, and of the total population. And of those who are eligible for a booster, only about 50% of them have been boosted. There are a lot of things that we can do from a public health standpoint. The other thing we can do, and I hope that we get the funding from the Congress to do this, is to continue to build up our supply of antivirals, of tests, and of the ability to give boosts. I mean, we have a number of clinical trials going that are trying to determine what the best combination of boosting is to get both effectiveness and durability. So we just can't stand still, particularly as we appear to be in somewhat of a lull in the cases, where cases continue to come down, deaths continue to come down, and hospitalizations. That's no time at all to declare victory, because this virus has fooled us before, and we really must be prepared for the possibility that we might get another variant, and we don't want to be caught flat-footed on that.
All right, and in the New York Times State of the Virus Coronavirus Update section, they write, virus activity continues to wane across the United States, with hospitalizations and new case reports both reaching their lowest levels since last summer. Coronavirus hospitalizations have fallen more than 80% from their January peak, around 25,000 from more than 150,000. The number of patients in intensive care units has also fallen. Progress has not been as swift with regard to deaths. Doesn't that seem like the most important statistic? Around 1,200 deaths continue to be announced most days. Wow. Well below the peak of the Omicron wave, but still very high. More than 965,000 deaths have been attributed to COVID-19 in the United States. So I guess we're going to be seeing that 1 million number not too far from now. And probably we realistically have surpassed it. And finally, every state is in far better shape than it was at the height of the Omicron wave. And many states continue to see significant declines in daily case reports and hospitalizations. In New Hampshire, Tennessee, and Montana, new case reports are down more than 70% in the last 2 weeks, and hospitalizations are down 50%. That is your State of the Virus Coronavirus update from the New York Times. And one final piece of audio that I want to play for you because I felt bad for my friend Rex Chapman. I mean, he's not my friend. I'm Twitter friends with him, but he became internet famous for promoting clips showcasing other people making gaffes, humorous gaffes, being subjected to something uncomfortable. But this weekend, Rex Chapman found himself on the wrong end of a viral video, folks. Apparently, during the TNT coverage of the NCAA tournament, Chapman was making his prediction for the Providence versus Richmond game, and Providence was seeing their first Sweet 16 opportunity in a quarter of a century. And Rex Chapman talked about the old Providence team from the late 90s and their coach, Pete Gillen. And he referred to him in the past tense. He said, rest in peace, Pete Gillen. But apparently Pete Gillen, as it happens, is very much alive. And, well, I know the feeling. I'll tell you about it after I play the clip for you.
Ed Cooley takes Providence back to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 25 years ago when Pete Gillen had God Sham God. Rest in peace, Pete Gillen. There you go.
Coach, who do you like?
Oh, no. Oh, dear. Guess what? Pete Gillen is actually a commentator at that same network. No, yes, indeed, he is. He works as an analyst for CBS, which is partnering with Rex Chapman's team at TNT on coverage of NCAA tournament. So Chaplin, working his first March Madness for the network, has recently been hired by CNN, immediately called out for the error. Pete Gillen is alive, if you're keeping score of what will be soon trending. Oh no, Rex Chapman thinks Pete Gillen is dead, in reference to the 1997 team. Rex said, rip Pete Gillen. Pete is very much alive. What's Pete Gillen going to say when he finds out that he died? And Rex Chapman, to his credit, wrote, it's a great day. Pete's alive. Well, it reminds me of my days at SiriusXM when actress Laura Dern was on the program, and I talked about her dad's influence, the great actor Bruce Dern. And I said, we lost him a couple years ago, but what was his influence on you? And then I got a text, and she answered the question. She didn't even push back on me, which is weird. But then I got a text from my producer at the time, Alfred, and it just said, Bruce is alive. Oh, God, I feel for you, Rex. It was the worst. Probably one of the worst moments, gaffes in my career. I went up later and apologized to her, and she acted like she didn't even hear me say it. To her credit, class act, that Laura Dern. So I feel for you, Rex Chapman. All right, that's all the audio I've got for you. Now it's time to get to the rest of the headlines. It's time for your news dump with a jingle from Pete Co., a brand new jingle, of course. And this is inspired by a kid who was ziplining in Costa Rica, and he slammed right into a sloth. There was a sloth on the line. Neither the sloth or the child were hurt. They just had to wait for the sloth to get out of the way. But here is the jingle, and it has inspired Pete Co. to write for us.
Tourist tropical jungle stopped ziplining with a thump. A sloth injured its face for today's news dump.
Oh, that is it's a great sloth impression. It injured its face. Well done, Pete Coe. As always, thank you very much. All right, let's get to the headlines I've got for you. I scrounged them up. Covered so much already, but there's still so much to go. Start in Norway, where there was a tragic military training accident. 4 U.S. Marines were killed in Norway during a NATO training exercise, according to the Norwegian police. Of course, it was one of these MV-22B Osprey tilt-rotor aircrafts that crashed in the northern city in Norway, and terrible accident. And those planes, man, I've heard so many bad things about those. Scary. Apparently, Justice Clarence Thomas has been hospitalized after experiencing flu-like symptoms. He's going to miss some oral arguments this week. He's the longest serving member of the Supreme Court, and he was admitted to a hospital in Washington, D.C. on Friday, expecting to be released for in a day or two. He's 73 years old and reportedly undergoing testing while being treated for an infection, and did not get a chance to ask Segall about it because that news broke after I talked to him. But I'm sure he wouldn't have had anything nice to say because he is no fan of Clarence Thomas, nor am I. Kanye West has been pulled from the Grammys lineup over concerning online behavior. Moving on, I really don't care. 85,000 birds have been euthanized as South Dakota is seeing its first avian flu outbreak since 2015. And for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine last month, a trio of Russian astronauts apparently arrived at the International Space Station, but when they opened the hatch to let them in, their appearance apparently raised some eyebrows, according to Space.com, because the Russian astronauts were wearing bright yellow flight suits with blue accents, which also happen to be the two colors making up the Ukrainian flag. Was it a message of solidarity with the Ukrainian people or just a coincidence? I really don't know. I didn't read far enough into the story. I just thought it was interesting. How about this? Oh, no. The Maury Povich Show has been canceled. After 3 decades of absolute garbage, Maury is, of course, a television icon here in the U.S., a pop culture legend, and he has finally been canceled. And I'm proud to say I don't think I ever saw one episode of the Maury Povich Show. An all-black women's World War II unit will be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. The unit sorted millions of pieces of mail in unheated warehouses during World War II. They're finally getting their due. President Joe Biden signed a bill into law March 14th that awards the Congressional Gold Medal to the women of the 6,888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, nicknamed the 6888. Bipartisan bill was passed by the Senate in April 2021 and the House last month. The 6888, a unit made up of 850 black women who were tasked with overcoming a massive backlog of mail, according to the Department of Defense. Melania Trump apparently letting Donald Trump know that she likes Senate candidate Dr. Oz, which I think is hilarious. I don't know why I'm even mentioning that story. A new trial is provided more evidence that ivermectin is not something that you should use to treat COVID-19. Another study saying there's no indication ivermectin is, quote, clinically useful in treating COVID-19. The trial of almost 1,400 COVID-19 patients at risk of severe disease found the drug failed to reduce hospital admissions. And look into more of that story from the Wall Street Journal, the FDA, and not Joe Rogan. Permanent daylight savings time bill that everybody's talking about. It passed the Senate. It's stalled in the House right now. What did I tell you? Missouri is considering a Texas-style law to stop out-of-state abortions. Stay classy, Missouri. The Biden administration apparently considered sending out gas cards to ease the pain at the pump, but apparently they're not administratively feasible solution, not seriously under consideration, but that was floated apparently. Minnesota public defenders have reached a deal to avert a strike, a tentative agreement, averting a walkout that could have brought much of the state court system to a standstill. Good for them. The United States will declare the Rohingya repression in Myanmar a genocide. At least 24 people were shot, including children, at a car show in rural Arkansas on Saturday night. At least one person has died. And how about this story? We don't have Ava for good news tonight, but I like this one coming out of Matanicus Island, Maine, where apparently there's an island of misfit toys in the popular holiday classic. Now there's an island for unwanted and banned books. That island in Maine, the tiny library on Matanicus Island, 22 miles off the Maine coast, is on a mission to fill its shelves with books that have fallen out of favor elsewhere. And I think that is good news. We'll try to get Ava back out here to the shed tomorrow. All right, well, that is your news dump, and now it's time to get to my guest interviews. Today we are starting with Maura Quint, everybody. Eric Segall coming up. We caught up on Saturday, but last night, Maura and I sat down, as we do most Sunday nights, and recapped the week, talked about what's coming up, and more importantly, just stuff and fun and analysis on things and thinking. Always love talking to Maura. You always love when we kick off the week with Maura. She, of course, is a writer and an activist. Find out more about her in the bio, in the show links. Follow her on Twitter at Behind Your Back on Twitter. Listen to the podcast she's now co-hosting, my so-called book club. You can support her there. And here we go.
When regressive taxation has gone too far and your Bloody Mary's just not up to par, it's Maura Mondays.
It's already that time of week again. I've got Maura Quint joining me via a secure video link.
Yeah, they've beamed me in. This is don't give away anything more or they'll find me.
A secure link. Nobody else has it. Nobody else can join us. It's just us. It's our regular Sunday chat for Monday. And I know, because I talked to you, it was Soccer Palooza over the weekend, right?
Soccer is back. That's right. It is very exciting. We had a tournament all weekend. Like I did anything. My 10-year-old had a tournament all weekend, which I drove him to and from.
So you went back and forth. You didn't stay. Like I stayed. The thing about sports, youth sports, is having to like give up your weekend and go somewhere. That was always a terror for me. And I'm glad that the girls were never involved in those kind of sports that took up the whole weekend.
Not only do you give up your entire weekend to be at like a child's soccer tournament, you pay for the privilege.
Right.
You have to give money for them to let you do this. It's wonderful. It's a great system.
I mean, if people like doing that, I'm not judging you. I just wouldn't want to do that. I get a lot done on the weekends, and I hang out with, I don't know, my girls are older, but.
No, I'm going crazy because I have all this stuff I need to do. There's one store that I have to go to that sells like used furniture. There's one piece there that I've seen that I want, that is perfect, that I need. They're only open on Saturdays. I was gone all day Saturday. Then they're open like weird hours during the week when I'm working. It was infuriating. I missed my chance.
Well,
that green little sofa is not going to be mine. And
it's a green little sofa. People did want to know. It's
like a mid-century modern kind of green sofa that is, because it's used, I can afford it, and it fits a space perfectly where I need something. This is really, really exciting stuff happening now in my life.
The thing is, spring is sprung. It is officially the spring equinox, and it was beautiful weather over the weekend. So at least you had that. And I do feel like I'm reading and thinking a lot about how important spring is in general, and that is certainly for those that live in colder climates in the Northeast, and how important it is this year. What with all that is going on, spring is very. Are you welcoming it?
Yeah, well, so I was at this soccer tournament outside all day Saturday and Sunday, and I hadn't done this in a while, and I don't know, it had been 6 months since I had to mom outdoors. And I forgot how, I just forgot how to do things. And so we were scrambling to get there on time. And on Saturday, I noticed that it was going to be kind of nice out, but I was just like, it's still winter. And I bundled them up, and we got there and we were burning hot all day Saturday, and it was gorgeous and beautiful out. But we were not appropriately attired because we still thought it was winter. And then today I was like, no, I got this. I'm on top of it. We got there on time. We were good to go. And it was freezing cold all day. There was an icy cold wind, and, we were in t-shirts. So screwed it up both ways, but enjoyed the one spring day that we got, even though I was not prepared.
You struck out both ways. Anything else about spring that you care about, think about, makes you feel a certain way, and specifically this year? Do you make any choices? Do you set any goals? Do you have any experiences, traditions, thoughts, feelings about spring? I love it. I love this time of year.
I love that you love it. My youngest son actually loves it too. And I think that's lovely. And I'm glad that I have both you and him in my life to remind me that this is something beautiful, as opposed to my general sense of panicking at the thought that I'm going to have to be in a swimsuit soon. Like, that's what spring usually brings for me, is just additional anxiety. But it's very, very nice to have people around who are like, this is wonderful, and let in the sunlight and the joy. I need your positivity. Let me soak it up like a vampire.
If you're feeling self-conscious about being in a swimsuit, have you thought about getting one of those suits with the frilly, like the more, that cover more type of things?
I think it's adorable that you think that there's a little frill that could cover up anything that I'm concerned about. I need, like, you know how there are those like single person submergent subs that like you can go in? There's just like a capsule, a giant sort of capsule. That's what I want, but I want it in a pool, so that like maybe if you peer in, you can see some eyes coming out at you, but otherwise it's just this giant.
Let's not get too extreme. Have you thought of just like a wetsuit?
They're tight. They still stick to your skin. I want something that's giving me some space in here. Like, okay, you know what? The Masked Singer, if they could do that for bathing suits, where it's just like you're just like in a like plushie.
How about a barrel with suspenders?
That sounds perfect. Oh my gosh. Where can I get one? Do they come in different colors?
They sell them at that furniture store that's only open on Saturdays, apparently.
I'll buy it in a spring color. I'll do a beautiful blush pink or whatever you want.
There's still time. I'm late, but there's still time, Maura, to plant some spring flower bulbs and anything else. Will you consider it? Because watching them come up is wonderful joy each day.
God, that sounds wonderful and great. Will you do that for me? Can you come and plant stuff in my yard?
I'm going to come over and plant some flowers for you.
And then build me a barrel that I could wear in the pool.
I don't build barrels, but I will see if I can get you.
You're going to be great.
What size?
I have tremendous faith in you.
What size barrel are you?
Oh, God. How embarrassing is that? If you did have to go into the barrel store, but be like, oh, wow. So do you have plus size barrels?
Where are the ladies' barrels? I want a men's barrel. I want something manly.
Yeah, no. Do you have like a boyfriend cut barrel? That would be great. Just sort of like.
How closely are you paying attention to the Putin's invasion? I know you thought a lot about that. You're in touch with people over there at one point, artists, right?
Yeah.
What? How closely are you paying attention? How much is that affecting you? Have your children asked about it?
I mean, I'm paying as much attention as one can, given that we still have to live these lives, which is sort of it's sort of absurd that there's war happening and we just go to the store and get a coffee every day.
It's exactly that thing where you're doing whatever you're doing and you're thinking that there is a war happening. And to be fair, there's always violence. There's always terrible things happening all over the world. However, I like to think that most things are good and most of the time. But still, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I get that feeling a lot. I even told, the girls I brought up as perspective, my daughter was like complaining or something. I was like, hey, at least you're not currently being bombed and hiding in a bomb shelter, to be grateful for what we have.
Yeah, no, it's very frightening. It's very upsetting. And, it really fills one with a sense of just utter, worthlessness, basically. It's not really the right word that I'm looking for, but what the heck can we do? Right?
Well, I know that at one point you said this to me. Maybe you said this, we talk often and on, and sometimes I get confused, but I know that you had said maybe you were going to volunteer to fight. Are you still thinking of joining a militia?
I was going to volunteer to fight you. That maybe did you not hear that last bit?
I thought you were.
That's what I was.
Oh,
that
I
was
thought
what
you
I
were
was
talking about going to the front.
Going right to the front of your shed and then fighting you.
Oh, all right. What would you, if you were to fight me, or have you ever been in a fight? What would your first move would be, just so I can be ready? Do you go right for the...
I have never, ever been in a fight, but if I were going to fight you, my first move would be to take my top off, because I think that would just confuse and like frighten you. And then I would just, then I could do whatever. I'd just kick you.
That would be like, what the hell? I thought you were angry with me. Why are you... Oh! Yes.
Yeah, that's what I think I would do. It's like a stunning. I don't have a stun gun. That's the closest I've got. I've got, stun tips.
It would work, but now I will be ready for it. I don't know why.
God damn it. Why did I give this away? You won't be ready for it. You'll still be surprised. I believe it.
Are you worried about free speech issues? All the conversation, and later on in the show, I have a long conversation with my friend Eric Segall, who's a constitutional law scholar. The New York Times editorial board put out a pretty controversial piece over the weekend. Everybody's talking about it. It's titled, "America Has a Free Speech Problem." And you just shared with me a tweet from somebody else that I think you shared, which I think makes a really good point. What do you want to say?
Well, I am concerned about the free speech problem that the New York Times editorial board must have, because, there's a bunch of them. And so to put out something so stupid, they must all be in fear of just one really dumb person, or they're all incredibly stupid. I'm not entirely sure which it is, but there's something wrong happening at the New York Times editorial board that, probably should be looked into, because it's so absurd. That piece was absurd. We're already constantly trying to battle simply the ignorance as to what the right to free speech is. It's not a freedom of consequences. It doesn't mean that you get to say whatever you want and have everyone tell you you're a nice, sweet little boy or girl and pat you on the head. That's not what free speech is. It simply means the government can't lock you up. It's a completely separate thing. I obviously, I'm being quite flip about it, but it's just such. The New York Times employed this fundamental misunderstanding, which just gives people more fodder to think that's actually what the case is. You're impeding my free speech because I didn't get to say things and have you tell me I was really smart.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds of speech, but the newest one, I think people debate and think a lot about is on social media. So if you tweet something, you can get canceled. I mean, this Ilya Shom, I forget his name. I talked about him with Eric Segall, the Georgetown professor. He got in trouble for a tweet and has been suspended. Lots of people have gotten in trouble for tweets, and people will say, oh, they were taken out of context and so on. But I think what you're saying is also true. I mean, Twitter is public. If you're going to voice your opinion in public, you may get in trouble.
I know people can get in trouble for things that they say, depending on what trouble means. I mean, certainly your employer can take issue, for all manner of things. If you, depending on what your job is and what you agree to, they may be concerned. But also, your friends and family can take issue with the things that you say publicly and can hold you accountable for that. It's not a right to not be held accountable. I think, we've had some conversation about canceling before, but I basically think that that's mostly nonsense. I mean, certainly there have been institutions that have overstepped or that have overreacted to certain forms of speech, but those are the exception, not the rule. It's not that bad unless the things you want to say or you want to be allowed to publicly state are really pretty terrible. I have unfriended a lot of people because of the things that they have said. That's not me canceling them. That's me making a choice as to who I want to spend time with.
Right. Or have in your life and consider a friend. Mm-hmm. Did you see that Keith Olbermann called, I think, Marjorie Taylor Greene a C next Tuesday?
I didn't see that.
But he wrote...
I didn't see you next Tuesday that.
He wrote, he didn't write the word out, wrote C asterisk and then 3 asterisks. I despise that woman, but that calling a woman that name, there's no it's never okay to me. And no matter who it is, I thought that was, how do you feel about that?
I struggle
when a man calls a woman, especially that word. That's been a threshold for me. I just thought of it because you're talking about friends that you've gotten rid of. Like, there's a guy who used to listen to the show. I liked him. I liked his tweets. We weren't friends, but like, he called some female commentator a C, and I was like, you know what? I don't like that lady either, but call her an asshole. Call her any number of other things that aren't gender specific, or, you know, something about an immutable characteristic. She happens to be a woman. I just felt like we don't need to do that. However, I do like the British usage of the word C in reference to other men. Aussies use it.
Like, I'm afraid to say it right now solely because I think you'll get mad at me, or maybe your listeners will or something. But all right, let's talk linguistics, shall we? So languages have taboo words. They're societally agreed on words that we've decided are taboo in some way, and taboo words change over time, what you are allowed to say by cultural norms. And you generally learn taboo words pretty young. You get exposed to them in some way when you're pretty young. You're usually a native speaker in the language, and you take in this sense that there's something wrong or bad about that, and it affects the way that you speak going forward. So all of that is to say, I never heard the C word until I was basically an adult. I just never encountered it. It was so taboo that it did not exist in my world in any way. Like, no one around me ever said it. I never read it. It wasn't in a movie. Like, it's just, you know, it was really, really an out there word. So by the time I learned it, I had sort of moved past the ability to take in new taboo words to an extent. Like, I would really have to train myself to learn that it's bad. And I just never did that. I love that word so much. I use it all the time, and it does not affect me or offend me. Like, the idea that you wouldn't use it for a woman, but you'd use it for a man, I don't know, just use it for anyone, like a dick or an asshole or a fuckwit or whatever, you know, you want to call them. It's just, and I love it. And it has that nice hard beginning, and it's just it's a juicy, good, fun word to say. So I have no, it doesn't bother me. I would be happy to call everyone.
Does it bother you if a man, in this case, Keith Oldman, calls a woman who's a despicable person that?
No, I want to use it all the time. It doesn't bother me at all.
Doesn't matter if a man uses it.
No, it does not affect me. But I mean, I'm holding back now because I know that other people, it affects them very strongly, and they have very, very intense feelings for it. So I'm trying to be mindful of that for other people. And I get it. Like, if you have a feeling that men shouldn't use it for women, okay, I understand that. I have none of it.
I just don't like insults that are about characteristics people, didn't choose. It just seems a little bit.
So do you feel like you can call someone a dick?
No, but I can call, but I guess I usually use that for men.
Yeah, you wouldn't call a woman a dick?
Yeah, I've said it to women. I said, you're being a dick right now. Yeah.
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 I mean, I feel like because the idea of genitalia is kind of taboo, right? Like the bathing suit areas. Mm-hmm. So just referring to it is sort of like a bad thing, like an asshole in the same way, it's the area that's covered up that we're not supposed to refer to. It's something bad or naughty. So to me, it's just like, that's just another word for it.
But everybody has an asshole is the difference.
Yeah, but everyone doesn't have a dick, but you can still call everyone a dick. It doesn't bother me.
The barrel suit areas.
I think, you know what? I would be more offended. In fact, I am. I will stake this claim right now. I've just decided it. I've made it up. Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow. I am more offended by someone using a word for vagina like pussy that implies weakness.
Sure.
Or
right.
Cunt just means an asshole, right? Like, that's what you don't hear it and think like a weak person or someone who's being really too soft or any of the sort of things we usually attribute to girls in a negative way. Cunt just means just a pain in the ass, just a terrible person.
I've found there's a big difference in saying that you are a blank versus you're being a blank.
Well, sure. I mean, that's just in general.
thought that I had made a profound point, and you were like, yeah, everybody knows that.
That's like couples therapy one-on-one or one-on-one, right?
Okay.
Like, like from day one, like, okay, there's a difference between assigning something to a person's entire being versus describing the way they are behaving in this moment, also versus describing the way that their behavior is affecting you.
Ooh, that's a good bonus piece of advice. Now, let's move on to COVID. I played a couple clips from some of the experts.
The other C word. I'm sorry.
COVID cunts. I didn't say that. You wrote, there's no longer a mask mandate where I live, and very few people are wearing them, but I'm encountering a new person I'm confused by. A person opting to wear a mask in public, the mask still isn't covering their nose. That is a really unique and interesting choice for that person.
I don't know what to do with it because, like, I'll go to the grocery store, and I mean, at this point where I am, 10 to 20% of the customers are wearing masks. So it is like the clear minority of people in masks. So you're not doing it to like try and like fit in. That's not happening. I don't understand what's happening. And all I could really think is like, oh, you're just someone who has, like, you got the message that coronavirus was a thing and we need to wear masks, but then you just checked out of society. Like you didn't update that information at all to like figure out how you were supposed to, or like you just, I don't know, you went back to the cabin you live in the woods, I assume. And this has been your first trip out.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting specific person. There should be a name for that person at this point. And if you see that person, I was walking behind a guy yesterday who was wearing a mask outside where I was on a walk where nobody was. And I've always, even at the height of COVID, thought that was a really weird thing. Sorry for those listening that do it. You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to shame it, but I really don't understand those people who go outside and wear masks, especially when nobody is around. That's a weird one for me. Always has been, but
I feel like there's two possibilities when I see that. One, it's someone who is just more used to being in a more crowded place. So like if you live in a city and being outside means still being pressed up against people, and that's just what you've internalized as the norm. Or someone who is outside because they're going between two places inside and it's just easier to just keep it on in transit. Like those are the two places where I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But again, yeah, I mean, whatever makes people feel comfortable at this point.
This guy, my dog stopped. I was ahead of him and then my dog stopped. So I stopped to get the poop and then guy caught up with me, but he was walking slow and then I was catching up with him and I was like, I feel bad going close to this guy because clearly he doesn't want to be near anybody. And what am I supposed to do? I got to pass him. And then he took at the last minute, he took a left and the encounter never occurred, which was just a microcosm of why worry about the things that are uncertain.
Maybe he was just trying to avoid smelling your dog's poop.
Could be. That's why he's wearing a mask.
Yeah. This is my new theory that I'm going with. I don't know.
I just felt bad because I was like, I'm going to get near the guy. Oh, man, where are we?
You should always feel bad about getting near people. I think that's like a healthy response.
I'm not sure what you're saying about me, but...
You think about that one for a while. It's all right.
I will.
You don't have to figure that out right now.
I'm going to write a note to myself to write in my journal. How about the Supreme Court hearings that are going to start this week with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson? Quint, will you be paying any attention? And if you do... and you see Republican senators attacking Biden's nominee, the first black woman to be nominated, for spurious things like defending people because everybody gets the right to a lawyer, even the most despicable people. How will you handle that?
Well, I'm sure I will have all sorts of opportunity to make fun of terrible people this week, but I'm not going to be paying close attention simply because I have too much else going on. And like, I don't feel as though I can affect this at all. So I will probably be a little checked out, I'm rooting for her, but I don't have a lot of like ways to help. And I'm just so busy this week, but it's about me really. The Supreme Court hearing is entirely about me.
I just wonder how closely people will be paying attention. I'm asking everybody. It'll be interesting to see.
What are you hearing? Like, I'm very curious actually, because I haven't seen as much.
She's one of those. She has defended. She was a public defender.
Yeah, so that much I know.
Which is amazing. All the public defenders I know are amazing human beings, doing important, the most important and thankless work. So she's defended a few people that are bad people, including I think a terrorist in Guantanamo, maybe, although who knows if they did anything wrong, or apparently, somebody who may have assaulted a child. Actually, don't know, so I shouldn't be saying it. But the point is, Senator Hawley has basically said that she'd, make it a big deal out of her defending some pedophile or something, and it's preposterous because that's noble for a public defender, for a lawyer to do. So I guess. That's we're going to see the attack of soft on crime, which is a dog whistle, a racist dog whistle. Soft on crime, Maura. How do you feel about people who are soft on crime, and how do you feel about the phrase soft on crime? I find it arousing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what exactly does it mean? I just picture someone like covered in marshmallows robbing a store or something. I'm not entirely sure, actually, what it.
You're not hard on crime. You're not hard on criminals. You're soft on them. You go soft on them. You're very...
Wait. And you found it arousing? You found the soft part arousing, not the hard part arousing.
That's correct.
Hey, look, you're an interesting guy. And I love finding out new things about you every week.
I don't care what anybody thinks.
About your sexual proclivities, frankly.
Soft on crime. The name of a porn, apparently, that I'm into. No, I mean, that idea that, she's got empathy. That she's got somebody attacked her. I think Mitch McConnell said, empathy. No, it was Senator John Barrasso. He's like, we don't need someone with empathy. We need someone who's going to, make the right judgments based on the Constitution. It's just like,
well, I mean, no, that's the thing, though, right? It has nothing to do with empathy. I mean, maybe it does, but it literally has to do with the Constitution. A public defender is someone who is going out of their way to specifically uphold the Sixth Amendment. A constitutional right to be represented by a lawyer. That's right there. It's one of the added on parts to the Constitution, but the conservatives tend to like those a lot, or at least they claim they do when they're talking about, the first or the second, for instance. But this is just more of same. This is someone who has specifically devoted themselves to upholding a constitutional right.
I feel like whenever we have
amendment right.
Now that we have had, I think, 2 nomination hearings since Brett Kavanaugh, it's hard not to relive the trauma that was Brett Kavanaugh, and be reminded that man is on the Supreme Court and was put on the Supreme Court by Donald Trump, both of which had been accused by several women of. Obviously, they're different, but do you ever think about that when you start hearing about the nomination hearings or think about Supreme Court? Do you ever think that fucking Brett Kavanaugh is up there?
Oh, all the time. I hope to never hear his name unless it is because he, drank too many beers and fell off the back of a boat and is no more. Like that's what I assume is going to happen to him. He's a disgusting, despicable human, and I hate knowing that he exists, let alone knowing that he's on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Because I always feel that way. I relive that. I was on live radio during that whole, hearing, and the calls that came in defending him were even just the callers were triggering, traumatizing, wild.
No, it's infuriating. And I mean, of all of the governmental institutions, the Supreme Court is the last one that I lost faith in. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just clung to this little kernel of the Supreme Court as this somehow still like good institution, even though I'm sure it never was. But, you have these like sort of childlike beliefs as to what our government is and what it's capable of. And it's these sort of ideals that you cling to, and they fall away as you grow up and you meet people who run for office and you go, oh, wow, you're not the best or the brightest. I kind of thought that the people in charge were like smart. Okay. And you let those go one by one. And the Supreme Court was just the one where I was like, no, but you do have to be really smart and you do have to work really hard. And it really means something. And it took me a long time to be able to be like, no, it doesn't. No, these people, some of them might be very smart. Some of them might work very hard. And some of them are just trash holes, just sitting up there, happy to get to bang a gavel sometimes.
Finally, let's end our conversations now with goals for the week. And I'll let you think about yours for another moment. But you said you have a super busy week, and I assume that means work-wise, but maybe it means kid-wise or other responsibilities that you have. Goals for the week for me are to make sure that I get in a good amount of exercise every day, eat mostly plants, and have really good shows this week. Book really good guests and have some new guests. Those are my goals. Your goals?
Those are really good goals. I hadn't thought about it. This is a good thing to do to center yourself for the week. I think my primary goal is just to not have anyone call me a cunt, I guess.
Unfortunately, it's too late. Guys, come on in. I brought a whole band worth of young men.
Oh, I would love that song. It would be my ringtone.
I guarantee somebody is going to think about one of my jingle writers, one of my many very talented listeners, is going to work it in. They're going to work the next Maura jingle is going to have the word. It's going to be involved just to make you laugh. It's not going to be calling you one. It's just going to be, there's going to be a song about how you feel about the word. I see it coming. It's going to be updated soon.
You see it coming. Yeah, I gotcha.
Maura Quint. Ooh, I almost said a different word. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, a pleasure to kick off our week with you.
Thank you.
All right, there she goes, Maura Quint at Behind Your Back. Let her know you enjoyed this discussion. She always appreciates it. Encourage her to have a good week. I hope you have a good week and have goals set for yours as well. All right, so next coming up, a long conversation with Eric Segall, almost an hour and a half. We get repetitive, we get argumentative, and I don't blame you for turning this one off at some point, but I don't know. I was enjoying it. I didn't want to quit. He didn't want to quit. You can write letters to him and I telling us that we were interrupting each other, we were disrespectful to each other, we were talking over each other at times. I think overwhelmingly, though, it's good and respectful. And the first half of it, I think, is great. And then the second half is when I'm talking about it, basically. But I don't know. I mean, I don't blame you for getting annoyed with me. I was getting annoyed with me a little bit. I was getting annoyed with him, and we were getting annoyed with each other. Overwhelmingly, I love this conversation. He is one of my closest friends. I'm arrogant to even think I can really probably hang in the conversation with him at times. But of course, he is a constitutional law scholar. He's an author. He's a podcaster. He's got a book called Supreme Myths and a podcast called Supreme Myths. His latest book is Originalism as Faith. He's been published in every major news outlet and every major legal law review. And you should read him at Dorf on Law. Follow him on Twitter and TikTok at eSpinSegall. Find him at Georgia State University teaching con law. The great Eric Segall. Here we go with the jingle.
Bringing knowledge and gloom and a guest house too. He's got a Labrador dog, glad to give you a poo, cause he's the legal eagle.
Eric Segall.
Eric Segall.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete Coe, for the jingle. You know what that means, of course. Here he is, live from his home. I mean, it's not live. It's live for me and you, I guess. Hi, you're fired up.
I'm in a mood.
Uh-oh.
I'm always in a mood at this point in our civil society.
What do you mean at this point? What point are we at?
I'm going to tell you right now, but don't get cross with me today because I'm in a mood.
Okay.
Pete, I'm telling you.
All right.
Treat me gingerly today because I'm in a mood.
All right, just the only thing I'd ask is that you really stay up on that phone or else I'm going to need a backup recording.
Okay, how's this? Better?
What?
I'm in a mood, Pete.
Oh.
Because less than 48 or around 48 hours from when we're taping this, do you know what starts?
The confirmation hearings for...
Don't call them that. Don't call them that.
Oh.
The confirmation charade.
Oh, why is it a confirmation for a charade? Of course, we're talking about President Biden's... Well, I've already told everybody what we're talking about. President Biden's replacement for Breyer, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Am I saying it right?
Yes. Now, at the top, I want to say I love Judge Jackson. She's going to be a great Supreme Court justice. This is not about her.
Okay.
How many times do I need to say that before people misquote me? This is not about her. Why is it a charade, you ask? That's a good question. You know who called it a charade, Pete? Who called the confirmation hearings a charade?
Ronald Reagan.
More importantly.
The Pope, John Paul, not the Benedict.
Even more important than that.
The man who called the charades.
Not a man.
The woman who called the confirmation hearings a charade.
In the 1990s, there was a brilliant young law professor at the University of Chicago who was annoyed that the confirmation process for Supreme Court justices was a hopeless charade, was the word this woman used. And she explained that no substantive answers are ever given, that everyone knows it's just a game, that when the votes are already, blah, blah, blah. And that woman was none other than Justice Elena Kagan before she became a justice. When she had her confirmation hearing, the very first question, other than, I think, what did you do on Christmas Eve? And she said something about Christmas Chinese food. But other than that, one of the very first questions she was asked was, she was Solicitor General at the time. General Kagan, you once called this process a hopeless charade. Do you think it's a charade? And guess what she said?
No.
I've evolved.
Right.
Something along those lines.
So
she was right the first time, obviously. It is a hopeless charade. So what's going to happen next week?
What was her argument and what's your argument that you agree with that it's a hopeless charade? That it's senators posturing and bullshitting?
It's senators posturing and bullshitting. Well said, my young friend. Second, they answer nothing of any substance. And third, and this is going to be the controversial part. Are you sitting down, Pete?
I was actually standing, but I will.
Have I mentioned I'm in a mood? I'm going to stand by this statement I'm about to tell you. They lie. They all lie during their confirmation hearing.
Well, you got to lie. You got to lie a little bit.
Do you know who didn't lie?
Bork.
Yeah, correct. So, for example,
and he got booted for not lying.
So
you got to lie a little bit. What do you want from people?
No, he didn't get booted. He did not get booted for not lying.
To be fair, I did just make that up.
He got booted because it was the swing seat. Justice Powell had resigned, and he was the swing vote. And everyone knew this was the most important seat. By the way, it became the most important seat when Justice Kennedy got it. All Bork did was answer the freaking questions and gave truthful. And you're right, he didn't lie, but he gave substantive answers, and he should have. And he got booted because that Democrats own the Senate, and it was a swing seat and incredibly important.
He should have lied.
He had too much of a record. I think if he had lied, he would have come off as a hypocrite. But maybe I'm wrong, since, for example, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who I love and think is a really good justice, 6 months before her confirmation charade, we're not calling it a hearing, we're calling it a charade. 6 months before her confirmation charade, she was a judge on the Court of Appeals, and she was giving a talk at Berkeley. And she said something to the effect of course, a wise Latina woman will, in many cases, decide cases differently than old white men because we have different values and different experiences. You and I both know that statement is 100% true. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
We've
At a
talked about
confirmation hearing, she walked it back and said it's not what she meant.
Right. Well, listen.
No, stop. No, don't be an apologist. I'm in a mood.
The bug is the bee in your bonnet that they are a charade because the nominee lies about either statements they made.
No.
Okay, where is the bee in your bonnet? Is it about anything to do with this specific?
It's everything. It's the whole damn thing. But here's the real point. I once wrote an article about Elena Kagan's confirmation, and I said the following. Elena Kagan was a law professor. She was the dean of Harvard Law School. And by all accounts, liberal, conservative, moderate. She did a great job as dean of Harvard Law School in a very tough spot because that law school was dysfunctional when she took over. And she was Solicitor General of the United States. So she was a law professor at an elite law school. She was a dean of Harvard, and she was Solicitor General of the United States. When asked, you think this hearing is a charade because that's what you wrote, instead of saying I've evolved and no, I don't feel that way, what she should have said is, well, I was a law professor at the time, so I use words like charade, because that gets when articles published. However, and maybe that's too strong. But what I do think is we should be forced to answer real questions. So, as former dean of Harvard Law School, I'm here to tell you that if you ask me my feelings about abortion, or if you ask me my feelings about affirmative action, or you ask me my feelings about campaign finance reform, I'm going to say the following. I have thought about these issues because I've been a law professor, I've been a Solicitor General, I've been dean of Harvard Law School. I am going to answer your questions as to how I feel today. I will not promise anything. That would be inappropriate. I will not commit to anything. That would be inappropriate. I will not comment on a case currently pending because that would be inappropriate. But if you ask me generally, for example, do I think Roe versus Wade was correctly decided? Or take a big affirmative action case called Grutter versus Michigan. Mm-hmm. If you ask me whether Grutter was correctly decided, I'm going to say to you, well, I thought about these issues and I think X and I think Y, but there are no briefs in front of me. I don't have parties in front of me. I might change my mind. I'm constantly evolving in my thought, but I'm not going to lie to you and say I haven't thought about these things or I don't have opinions on them because, of course, I do. Now, almost done. As to my great and wonderful hero, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said at one point that it would be inappropriate to comment on cases that could come before them. She had a point, but I think, and with all due respect to someone I admire and love, I think she went too far. I'm not going to comment on cases, but I will comment on issues. And yes, I think women should have a constitutional right to an abortion. What that means exactly, I will tell you when I see a case. Or I think, generally speaking, universities should be allowed to use affirmative action. But until I see a particular case and a particular fact pattern, I can't give you a definite answer and won't. Or I don't think the Second Amendment protects the right for guns, but that's what the Supreme Court has held. I do believe in precedent, and I will tell you when I get my next case how I feel about it. But I've thought about these issues, and in my opinion, the court in Heller was incorrect. And by the way, she could have said, not only do I think that, but there are several famous judges on the lower courts, like Judge Richard Posner and Judge Wilkinson in the Fourth Circuit, who wrote law review articles saying Heller was wrong. And I've read those articles, and you know what? I'm somewhat persuaded by them. But again, I have to follow precedent, and I will do my best I can when I see the case. What's wrong with all of that?
That's quite reasonable. It was really well performed. It made me want to see you be the nominee, or at least write that for the nominee. And
I did.
I'm not.
No, I did write it. I did write it for the nominee in the sense that I wrote a law review article in the form of a speech.
I wish I were smart enough to poke holes in why that wouldn't work.
Well, so my colleague, my liberal progressive colleague, who currently, as we tape this, works for President Biden, and he worked for President Obama, and he worked for President Clinton, very loyal Democrat. He disagreed with me, and he wrote a response to my. So I wrote a speech.
Great. Well, what did he say? I would agree with him just to be a dick.
So I wrote basically what Kagan should have said, and the Washington University Law Review, which is a pretty good law review, published it. He responded, and he said, "I wish Eric was right. In a perfect world, he would be. Obviously, he is right. But in our world, if Justice Kagan said that, she would never get confirmed."
Right. That's what I said.
I disagree with both.
Oh, well, I didn't say that actually until you. I said it at first, and then you did your thing, and then you convinced me. You gave your performance, and it worked upon me.
Let me convince you again. So he wrote
in
a response
post. I might put inspiring music behind it.
He wrote a response saying, "This is Eric being unrealistic." I mean, Eric is right, but not in this world, and it can't happen in this world. And she would be voted down and all that stuff. He's wrong. And he was wrong, and this is why he's wrong, and you were wrong 10 seconds ago. Pete, if Judge Jackson said in her opening comment, this is why I have to be careful. I do not want the first female black. Part of my argument about Kagan was she was former dean of Harvard Law School. She has a credibility not all nominees have.
Right.
Okay. I don't want to put on Judge Jackson the obligation to fix this charade. That's not fair to her.
That's a good point. That's a nice caveat of you.
So I want to put that
very
in there.
Sensitive of you.
But if she, so I'm not saying that she is doing anything wrong. It's the system that's broken.
No, the whole confirmation hearing is always a great opportunity for anybody to talk about in this case, as you're referring to it, the charade that is the confirmation hearings, and that's what you're making a great case.
Right. And thank you. And what Jackson could say and still get confirmed, in my opinion, is the following. I think the American people are a little bit tired of this charade that the Supreme Court decides cases exclusively based on the law. I've been a judge now for how many years she's been a judge. If I am lucky enough to be confirmed, of course I'm going to look to the law. The law is the first thing a judge looks at, and that's what we do. However, and then, by the way, Justice Souter said this in a speech to Harvard, but in most of the constitutional law cases that we hear, the reality is the law leaves us enormous discretion. It just does. Whether or not abortion is protected by the Constitution, whether or not owning AK-47s is protected by the Constitution, whether or not affirmative action is barred by the Constitution, these are all questions we just can't look at the text and come up with an answer to.
Right.
So in exercising the great discretion we have in those cases, we do our best to focus on the law, but our personal values and experiences obviously come into play. And, senators, if any one of you in this room think that's not true, then you've not been paying attention, and the American people know it's true, so why can't I say it out loud?
Oh, I like that.
If Fox and CNN plays that soundbite, the American people love her. She becomes a hero.
Well,
now there'll be right-wing pundits like Tucker Carl Fuckface who will take that and say, oh, she's just going to decide cases based on her values. She's a liberal judge. And there will be some percentage of the population that buys that. But the great middle, Pete, the middle, not the far left or the far right, but the middle understands that the Supreme Court decides cases based on values and politics and experiences.
I think the far left understands that.
Fair enough. Well, I think everybody understands that. The far right lies about it. Well, no, both the right and the left complain that the other side is making the law, not interpreting the law, all that bullshit. All she has to say is, I'm here to talk about the truth, and I will not comment on a case that is currently pending, and I will not comment on a specific fact pattern. But if you want to ask me broad questions about abortion, guns, affirmative action, obviously I've thought about these issues.
Right.
And I will give you my tentative thoughts. And I think here's the key sentence. The American people deserve to know my opinion, my tentative opinions on these subjects before you, the Senate, votes on my confirmation. Because if the American people really hate what I'm about to say, then they should communicate that to you, and you should do your job. Now, again, I don't want her to do this necessarily because it's not fair to put this on her. But that's how these confirmation hearings should go. And we all know that they have opinions. Justice Thomas testified under oath that he had never debated Roe versus Wade with anybody or talked about it with anybody. And we know that he did. He lied. Sotomayor lied about the Wise Latina statement. Kagan lied about what she meant by a charade. Roberts said we're just umpires calling balls and strikes, and we know how ridiculous that is. Every time we have these confirmations, something like that happens, and the Kavanaugh hearings speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Gorsuch made all kinds of ridiculous statements about originalism. It is so painful to watch. In fact, yesterday on Twitter, I crowdsourced this and asked, do I have to watch next week, really? And a really famous law professor at Yale said, no, you don't. I think I do have to watch a little, unfortunately. But I think one of these days, by the way, this seat is completely unimportant. It doesn't matter. Changes nothing.
Right.
So,
it changes, as you've said and written, there's a very symbolic change. You've talked about that.
More than symbolic. The voice of a black woman on the court will be good, but it won't change any vote you and I care about.
Right. I think that's probably pretty fair to say.
Which means, I think Kagan had a unique opportunity because she was the dean of Harvard and had kind of the academic, pedigree to say, I've thought about this, I've written about it, I've studied it. Here's how we can make this process better. She blew that opportunity. I don't think the Republicans are going to Pete, the Republicans are going to say things to their base about this confirmation hearing that's going to be racist, that they already have, and that meant to make political statements.
Right.
We know she's going to be confirmed, absent some kind of new information we don't have, or she completely breaks down. But she's not going to do that. So she's going to be confirmed. So how much is there to lose? And think how much of a hero you could be. Again, I'm hesitant to put this on her, but think about how much of a hero you can be to say, you know what, this process really does need a fix. And here's how to fix it. Ask me questions. I'll be honest with you. Don't ask me to make any promises. Don't ask me to commit. Right. And don't ask me about specific fact patterns. But if you ask me about anything else, I'll answer your questions.
What about just a quick question on this week? We're going to see Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's record of, quote, defending terrorists. That's how Republicans put this. That's how people often refer to the fundamental part of the legal system, ensuring everybody has access to a lawyer. I watched the John Adams miniseries, and he defended the British soldiers who had slaughtered the townspeople who were
Right. So let's just cut to the chase and forget what Segall thinks about this. Let's talk about Professor Jonathan Adler, who is one of the people who fought against Obamacare pretty much, since the day it was passed. He's been on your show, I think, once. But he and I debated about, all kinds of Obamacare cases. He's a card-carrying Federalist Society member and all of that. He has written beautifully on this subject, both left and right. We cannot criticize lawyers for taking clients in this country. We just can't.
No matter what client they take. Timothy McVeigh.
Well, okay, when you say no matter what, so let's take the worst thing we can think of other than
Timothy McVeigh.
Let's take or let's take someone who has molested 1,000 kids. I don't.
Judge the gymnastics trainer.
Right. Or pick. I'm going to say something bad now. Or pick pretty much any priest.
Now.
That was bad.
Pretty much any. I mean, it's
pretty much
frighteningly large percentage, and it's indoctrinated into. Okay, I'll allow for it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Where were we now?
The idea of defending.
In this country, not true in all countries. In this country, you are presumed innocent till the government proves you guilty. And you are, if it's a felony, entitled to a jury of your peers, whatever peers means. And which means for the system to work, everybody gets to have a lawyer, no matter how pernicious you are and how terrible you are. And therefore, there have to be lawyers willing to represent the worst, most evil among us. And I think that system is the right one. Do you have a better system? I mean, do you think people should not get lawyers? I mean, so what Jonathan has said very beautifully, and I think others have said, is both the left and the right never should criticize any lawyer for taking a case. Now, could there be an example? Could there be someone who slaughters an innocent, slaughters 1,000 people for no reason on video? He's yelling, I hate you, I'm going to kill you. And
Anders Breivik, the Norwegian shooter, he got a trial, and during this trial, he got the opportunity to, I think, lay out some of his manifesto. Either way, he was made a martyr and a hero amongst the white supremacist movement across the world. Go ahead, use him.
Right.
I mean, it's Norway, but
in this country, I still think. So Pete, in the law, there's a great philosophical kind of debate and an interesting idea about when do you have a rule and when do you have a standard. If you have a rule, it basically means hopefully no exceptions or almost no exceptions, and we know what the next case is going to say. With a flexible, so the rule used to be under Roe versus Wade, no rules about abortion in the first trimester. They're all illegal. Casey changed that so that's a rule, and it's very easy to apply. And by the way, they did. But from 1973 when Roe was decided to 1992 when Casey was decided, all rules about women when it came to abortion were struck down. I'm not talking about minors. I'm not talking about funding, but all obstacles that were put in the way of women to get abortions were struck down. Then Casey changed the rule, no rules in the first trimester, to a standard, undue burden. And what undue burden means, we don't know, and now all hell is broken out. Should every person in America who is accused of a crime, of a felony, get a lawyer? We can't say, well, yes, except for the very worst ones. Right. That standard would not work. It has to be a clear rule. Everybody gets a lawyer. If everybody gets a lawyer, then how can we criticize lawyers for taking the case? I think that's absurd. It's part of lawyers' obligation. So I think that's just a ridiculous argument, and it'll be part of the grand charade. That's putting me in a mood.
Right.
Have I mentioned I'm in a mood? Yeah.
Yes. Back to the mood. Okay, so let's move on to, now this is related to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. We've got a couple of free speech related issues to talk about. And so first, let's talk about your friend and mine. He's not my friend. I've never met him. I've just heard of him, but you know him, right?
Ilya Shapiro.
Ilya Shapiro. He is
not a friend, but somebody I've debated at least 3, maybe 4 times. I certainly have.
I'm sorry. I thought he was the godfather of one of your children.
No.
Oh, that must be Adler.
I have been criticizing him for many, many years because.
All right. Well, let me set it up for you.
Yes.
Or do you want to tell? Actually,
no. Go ahead. Set it up.
Okay. So he's a prominent libertarian guy, constitutional law guy.
He used to work for Cato.
But he was hired to be a senior lecturer at the prestigious Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C., and he was then hired to run its Center for the Constitution. But before his first day on the job,
hold on just 1 second. The Center for the Constitution at Georgetown is run by, yes, he's going to administer it. Randy Barnett is basically the brainchild behind that. It's really a Center for Originalism. It's called Center for Constitutional Law, but it's mostly a Center for Originalism.
That's why I'm glad you're here to correct this or just punch it up. Before his first day on the job, he tweeted a critique of the woman that we've been talking about, President Biden's nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And he said he recommended another guy who is a chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, right?
Yes.
And he is of South Asian descent. He's a guy. And he tweeted, but alas, and this guy's name is like Srinivasan.
Srivasan or something I can't pronounce.
But alas, Srinivasan doesn't fit into the latest intersectionality hierarchy, so we get a lesser black woman. Thank heaven for small favors.
Pete, key point here. He made that statement before anybody was nominated.
Before she was even nominated, he said this.
So the point is the many horrible things in that tweet. One of them is there are no black women who would be as good as that guy. Right. That's the implication.
That's even more important. That you can't defend against. No, I was comparing her record. He was saying there isn't anybody.
Correct. Because she hadn't been nominated yet when he said that.
So he deleted the tweet, apologized for it, called it inartful, but the damage was done. The Georgetown Law School dean described his words as antithetical to the work that we do here every day to build inclusion, belonging, and respect for diversity. And a large coalition of Georgetown students called for Georgetown to rescind his employment. And what happened? And what do you think about this?
So a couple things. First, I talked to him a couple weeks ago in San Diego at a conference. At that time, he told me that they were investigating him and nothing had been decided yet. I assume that's still the case. We would have heard about it if it had. But that's not the issue. So what I criticized him over the years for is he claims to be an originalist, but he's not. He's just a libertarian, and every result he wants is a libertarian result, not an originalist result. And so I've called him a hypocrite over the years on that question. That has nothing to do with this. What I want to talk about is two things. One, the Federalist Society is now inviting him to speak at places because they know what's going to happen when he does. Liberals are going to show up and shout him down. So he was invited to speak at a law school in San Francisco called Hastings Law School, a very good law school in San Francisco. And he showed up to give his Federalist Society talk. And the students would not let him speak. They drowned him out. They did that for an hour. And eventually they gave up, and the speech never happened. This is happening that's an extreme case, but things like this are happening all over the country, on both sides, really, on both sides. And what the students at Hastings...
Be specific, when you say things like this are happening all over the country. First of all, I'm still pretty convinced that that's an overstatement. statement that all over the country. I think that every time one of these things happens, we hear about it, but it's not that many times. I may be wrong, but more importantly, you're referring to things like this happening. You're referring to people going to speak on college campuses and being shouted down, specifically and only that issue?
No, so that's a subset of a larger problem, which is, I think the best example of the larger problem is a woman I met, this is a while back now, but this problem hasn't gone away. About 3 years ago, right before COVID, I was at a conference and a woman, law professor who I really respect, who teaches at the University of Alabama, I'll mention that 3 times, Alabama, said she could know the entry level or the required criminal law course at most law schools in America. You learn about, what is arson, what is burglary, what is theft, all that stuff, and what is rape. And unfortunately, we still have to teach that topic. And she said she couldn't teach it anymore because there was no way for her to teach the subject of rape without teaching cases about rape, and her students would be triggered by that, and there was no way for her to teach it. And so she stopped teaching rape, which means the students don't get a subject that's on their bar exam. Now, here's what I want to say. Of course, we're all sensitive to the idea that there might be women.
Is there any other professor that has had a similar response about teaching those cases about rape because the students would get triggered? And how many? 1, 2, 1,000?
I don't know the answer, but I've had several tell me.
Okay, well, that's okay.
No, but Pete,
you would know if this was endemic in law schools.
Let me give you another example.
Yes, but is it endemic? I don't care if
I don't know if it's endemic. I don't know if it's endemic.
Well, isn't that the most important point? Why is that not the most important point? Because it sounds like it's
endemic enough for the freaking New York Times to write a horrific op-ed about it yesterday. I'm not talking about an op-ed by a guest person. The New York Times editorial board wrote their newspaper, this is the viewpoint of the newspaper op-ed on what they claim to be the tension between wanting to have free speech and also you shouldn't shout down people, and if you're shouted down, that might even be worse than having your free speech abridged. And my point is that it's important enough, Pete, where it's in magazines, it's on Slate, it's on New York Times, it's in a lot of places. And the other thing is Hastings is I don't know, it's considered a very good law school. So, but this has happened at Berkeley too, which is the top 10 law school, run by my friend Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, who is one of the great liberals who's written many books on freedom of speech. And I think the world of, and most people think the world of Erwin Chemerinsky, at least most people on the left. It is absolutely another example. Dean Chemerinsky has said, and so he's one of the few con law professors in the country who also does criminal procedures. So he was big in the O.J. Simpson case. He can talk about affirmative action, but unlike me, he can also talk about the Fourth Amendment, that kind of stuff. He will not speak at Federalist Society events.
Okay, so hold on. You brought up the New York Times article, and I think I think it's really important. I think this is a super important issue. Op-ed by the editorial board. This is a really important issue. I'm going to talk with a lot of people and try to get probably several points of view on it, I think. And I'm glad I'm talking with you first. But that article and this conversation, right now you're talking about university professors being shut down.
You didn't let me finish because there's a second half of this, which is more important, which is the red states trying to censor what teachers teach their students about American history.
That's why I want to just quickly frame it. Yeah. So first of all, no one can define cancel culture. Can we agree?
Yes.
Or everybody can. And
nobody can. Nobody can.
But everybody has their own definition, and the right blames the left, the left fires back at the right, and so on. But we are talking, to me, it comes down to society and kind of groupthink and even mobs shouting down versus the government at the state or federal level passing legislation. Is it more complex than that? I mean, obviously, Twitter mobs.
Those are different questions. But let's go back. Can we just go back to Hastings for 1 minute? I think you're wrong to downplay this. First of all, Hastings. I didn't make this clear. This is my fault. I was a terrible guest. Hastings is a state school, which means, like my school, Georgia State. I know Hastings doesn't sound like a state school, but it is. It's part of the University
Hastings
of California.
again. I'm just reminding me. Is that's where Ilya Shapiro went to speak?
Yes, was shouted down. Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Well, what was that?
That my internet started playing because I was scrolling to try to find that information. Go ahead, sorry.
Maybe you were shouting me down with electronic noise.
Yeah. When I don't like your arguments or something, I just go, let's see if I can do it again. I can't. Of course, I can't recreate. Here it is. Just interference. Sorry, what were you saying?
Hastings, not only is Hastings a state school, but because it's a state school, it was part of a big Supreme Court lawsuit a long time ago where they refused to fund a Christian organization that wouldn't take gays. And although the school won that fight in the Supreme Court on that day, they're going to lose it in the future because the Supreme Court has changed. My point is, when a state, there's a difference between a state school and Yale, a private school. Because you talked about legislation. Yes, it's much more important to me that Georgia and Florida and Texas and Oklahoma and all these red states are putting in place censorship schemes in some states for K through 12, in some other states for K through, graduate school. That is a major, major, major problem.
You said it's much more important for me. What you mean is obviously the bigger issue, the more frightening, damaging, dangerous issue is.
But they're related because if you talk to, anybody who would vote for a law that says you can't teach critical race theory in high schools, for example, which of course you and I talked before isn't even an issue. Anybody who votes for that law, I already have trouble with, and I'm going to have trouble finding common ground with. But I think if we give them the benefit of the doubt, just for 1 second, what they will say is the left cancels us all the time, so we have to fight back. Now, I don't believe that, but that's their defense. The left does this all the time, so this is just us fighting back. And when things happen like the thing that happened at Hastings, which was handled horrifically by Hastings, and this is a point about your legislation, when Hastings makes a decision about something like this, Pete, that is a unit of government, not Yale, not Harvard. It's a unit of government making that distinction. So here's what happened, what should have happened in Hastings. What should have happened in Hastings was the students should have been allowed to scream and yell for 5 minutes, get it off their chests. And then a teacher comes in the room and says, look, we have an invited guest here. They're allowed to speak. You have two choices. You can sit here quietly and then ask your questions during the Q&A in an orderly way. That's one option. Or you can go outside and protest out there any way you want to that's peaceful, as long as you don't do it in a way that drowns out the speaker. But if you want to go out and protest and tell people not to come in a peaceful way, whatever, you can do that. And then we're going to let this invited guest speak. That's what they should have done. And that's exactly what happened at Yale a couple of days ago when a lawyer who has really, really terrible views on gay rights and everything involving gay rights was at first shouted down by Yale students. But then the teacher came in and said, listen, folks, we have a speech code at this law school.
Yes, Yale has a 3 strikes rule, which governs the line between expressing your own views and silencing others. You sent me a great Slate article describing this. And under the rule, students who disrupt an event are first given an extensive warning laying out the school's free speech policy. If they continue with their disruption, they're given a shorter second warning. At that point, if they do not relent, administrators must ask them to leave or call the Yale or on-campus police if this were being applied to some other university.
And I think that's exactly the right way of handling this.
And that's a new kind of middle ground way to handle this. Give the student.
It's not a middle ground. It's a reasonable ground. It's a good ground. Yeah. Give them 5 minutes to get their
So you're talking about now the differences between a state university and a private university and how they chose to handle a speaker. And go ahead.
Well, I only refer to the state university because you are making a distinction between laws and non-laws. And what I'm saying to you is, whatever Yale does has nothing to do with the law, so to speak. That's a private school. It's like my house. I can invite you over for dinner and say you can come, but not if you talk about this or that. It's a private place. But Hastings is a unit of the state of California. When they allow a speaker to get drowned out and don't do anything to stop that, that is kind of the equivalent of passing a law saying he can't speak here.
It is not the equivalent.
Well,
it is not. There must be a distinction between a law being passed and someone being.
Of course there is. But the point is, a government unit.
And also, you're making a weird. And help me understand. I'm sure you're doing this for a reason. You're saying a state school versus a private school, it looks far worse for a state school.
I didn't say it looks. No. I'm not saying it looks.
It is worse.
You misunderstood. No, I'm not saying anything of the sort. I'm saying different rules apply. The First Amendment tells us nothing.
Well, different rules shouldn't apply. It's a university. Like, why does the kid that can't afford Yale have to?
Well, they can go to the University of Georgia, which is much cheaper. I mean, they can go to. The price isn't the issue. Hold on, back up. No, I'm sorry. I should have been clear at the outset. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution does not apply to Yale or Harvard or Emory. It has no effect.
Or private businesses?
Or private businesses. It does affect Georgia State, where I work, the University of Georgia, the University of California, and Hastings is part of the University of California system. So for example, a private university could, and I think places like Liberty University might, because they're a religious school. Tomorrow, Emory, around the corner from my house, a private university, could say, you know what, we're done. We don't want any more conservatives speaking on this campus. If we're going to be a liberal school, we're only going to hear liberal speakers. And if you don't like it, don't come to Emory. They could do that without running afoul of the Constitution because they're a private school. Just like you can have a dinner party and say only Democrats need come. Hastings and Georgia State can't do that under traditional thinking about. Now, by the way, I'm giving you the dominant view in America, which is a state university is bound by the First Amendment in ways that private schools are not, and that state universities probably can't do what we call in the field viewpoint-based discrimination.
Well,
in other words, let me explain that. Hold on, let me explain that. Georgia State could say, you know what, we're done with political debates. It's just too hard, it's too aggravating, it's too controversial, no more political debates. That would be constitutional. But what Georgia State cannot do is say we're only going to invite Democrats, or we're only going to invite liberals, or we're only going to invite conservatives. That they could not do because it is a unit of state government funded by the taxpayers making viewpoint discrimination rules. What Hastings should have done is exactly what Yale did. That's
right. Okay. So, but I still feel as though the higher learning free speech issues, the Twitter, social media mobs, and those are far different and should be handled and spoken about differently than the several example after example of state and federal either legislation or even just. I'm reminded of the federal government did an investigation called the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, where it's supposed to be a bipartisan group of legislators investigating the financial crisis of 2008. And Republicans would not allow for certain language, which was the language most necessary to identify the primary problem. I believe it was something about credit default swaps. They say you can't use it.
Back up, because you're misleading your listeners. I know you don't want to mislead your listeners. What you just identified could be a horrific problem and a travesty, but it's not a free speech issue. When the government
agreed, but let me finish. Then in the state of Florida, the Republican legislature said they couldn't use language to refer to to use language referring to climate change. Now, they're allowed to negotiate about language. They're allowed to censor language that they would put in there. But that kind of censorship is way worse than any mob saying to one small group of students that this speaker can't speak here. Furthermore, the book banning and the curriculum censoring, that stuff, there is the idea that there's any equivalence to me is where I get bee in my bonnet.
Are you in a mood?
Well, it puts a bee in my bonnet, which also reminds me I have to do a live read for bee in a bonnet. Folks, do you have problems with mosquitoes? Well, if mosquitoes are an issue, you need to wear the bee in the bonnet. Folks, we're on it. Bee in the bonnet. Go ahead.
You bypassed what I was trying to say.
Oh, no.
Connecting these two things.
Oh, no.
Which is not a defense of these two things. So once again, I'm going to use my cliched, which was now a cliche for me, which is we can hold two or three ideas in our heads at the same time. So let's try to do that right now. First of all of these laws that are coming out of red states are horrific and tragic and terrible for so many reasons that, by the way, Pete, go beyond freedom of speech.
Can I read a little more litany of them?
No, I want you to let me finish my point first. These laws are terrible. And I believe me, there's no one is, I'm not debating that with you. Nobody would. What happened at Hastings, not as terrible, but still terrible. It's still terrible when in an academic environment, a person, even if he is a racist, and by the way, I think Ilya Shapiro, and I know him fairly well. He's what I don't know what the right expression for this is. He clearly is affected by racism. He clearly is not self-reflected on his own views on race. I don't think he sets out to be a racist. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying, I'm telling you the full picture. I know who this guy is. He clearly is not someone who would identify as a racist. He's not a white supremacist.
Nobody identifies. Come on. Who identifies as a racist?
Well, white supremacist.
I mean, sometimes they don't, but go ahead. That's not much of
he's not that. But he did a terrible tweet, and he has some very pernicious views about affirmative action and race. And I've told him that to his face. Anyway,
and do you know one constitutional law professor who identifies as racist?
No.
All right.
Yeah. No.
That's where the standard should be for him. Go ahead.
That's fine. Okay. That's fine. I can live with that. So what happened to him was terrible. But what I'm trying to tell you is what's happening at Yale and Hastings, what's happening in the red states passing all of these laws, and the New York Times op-ed yesterday, and the articles in Slate. And by the way, yours truly, me, wrote an article about free speech on campus last year with a political science professor that got published in a non-law review, pretty prestigious humanities journal. Why did I spend 6 months co-writing a 40-page article on free speech on campus? Because, Pete, it's a real thing. In other words, I don't spend a lot of time, other than with one exception, on things like this. The one exception is, of course, I was right about, but
it is a real thing. It is not. It is a real thing. Okay. You have not yet convinced me.
I wasn't trying to. What I was trying to convince you of was Pete, it's important to me. I know it's important to you on most issues, not every issue, but most issues, that we try to understand where the other side is coming from. Is that fair?
It's important that, of course, it's important to understand how the other. But what's also important is to make sure that we don't equate the other side's argument, or in this case, campaign or movement, to.
But as a very agreed. So let me say,
and I would say, in terms of the amount of damage that it does, and you're a law scholar and a free speech advocate and expert, and so of course you're going to write 2,500 words about it, but you still have to, in a conversation like this, acknowledge, I would argue, that there is not even a remote comparison between shouting down professors at a college versus what the right in this country is doing. I'm at my school board meeting. What they are doing across the country, it's school boards across the country, is they are trying to censor the curriculum and whitewash it. That is they shouldn't be in the same conversation.
Well, you're wrong.
How dare you?
You're dead wrong.
How
You're flatly 100% wrong. They have to be in the same conversation. Now, first of all, to correct something you said, I'm not making an importance comment. I'm not saying which is more important or not important. I am making a linkage comment. What I'm trying to say to you is, if you want to get in the heads of let me back up. I mentioned this to you before, but there's no reason for you to remember this. I have a very, 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 very close friend of 40 years in Atlanta who is very involved in local politics, something I'm not involved in. I'm on a federal level. And she works for a lobbying group on these issues, on education issues, mostly for public schools versus vouchers, but also on these now. She's also got a big grant to fight this anti-CRT thing. She's in the middle of this fight. Let's be real clear at the beginning. What this is really about, of course, is getting votes for Republicans. It's not about pedagogy. It's not about censorship. It's about they think these laws and the debates over these laws will get them votes. So that's
true of everything Republicans do. So it's not.
I'm just trying to be clear.
I know, the other really important, I think, point is that you're making, you and others, it sounds like, are saying this is a problem that the left has, which is shouting down conservative, often white supremacist speakers at colleges. And I'm here. I disagree. The right does that as well. In fact, when they do it, it actually animates people to commit violence. For example, these convoys, that is the exact equivalence, except way worse, of shouting down a professor.
Well, I wasn't saying, I've already said like 14,006 times and during the last 3 minutes or 8 minutes that the laws being passed by red states are
No. I know that. I know that you're saying that. Maybe I'm not being clear.
Pete,
both the left and the right shout down people.
Right, but
that's not a left problem.
I want to say something else to you. You're not letting me say.
Okay.
Which means you're putting me in an even worse mood. Did I mention the confirmation charade starts Monday, and I'm already in a bad mood about it? When the left does things like it did at Hastings, it makes the problem worse. It's not that it's worse than the problem. It's not. It's not that the motives are as bad, that they're not. But as a cause and effect, as a causal thing, it is true that when national stories come out about things like happened at Hastings, it fuels the right's energy to say they're going to censor us, we're going to censor them. And that is a statement of fact. It's not a normative statement. It's not a.
I don't understand. It's a right-wing thing, though. They're doing that.
It's not. It's not, Pete. This guy, Ilya Shapiro, who...
You're telling me that people on the right never do anything.
No, I didn't say that.
To shut down the speech of liberal speakers, and you're telling, and you're saying
no. Hold on. We got in this whole context conversation. It's not conservatives at the university. Hold on. It's not conservatives at the University of Alabama that make it impossible for my friend there to teach rape. It's not conservatives. It is not conservatives who make it impossible. So that's why I was going back to my friend.
Conservatives are actively trying to bring back the old days of Christian nationalism and white supremacy.
Yes, they are.
In every way, including this type of behavior and shouting people down. Of course they are doing that in every state. Are you not paying attention to the same thing I am?
Well, hold on. First of all, no one has spoken out more about evangelical evil.
I know.
Okay. So that's just start
all
there.
Right. In case anybody doesn't know your feelings on such things.
Yes. What I said on your show like 5 years ago was that we have I'm going to pat myself on the back for this. Sorry. Patting on the back moment. Pete, I mentioned to you long before Russia invaded Ukraine years ago, that there is and it's because Sarah Posner wrote that great book and other things I know. I said it before Sarah wrote that book. There has been an alliance in this country between the evangelical right and Putin and right-wing dictators since 2013. When Russia passed the worst, most awful anti-gay bill in Russia's history, that is when the evangelicals in America linked up with those people.
And you don't think that on Christians on
just be clear.
You don't think there are Christian nationalists that are minimizing, marginalizing, discriminating, and excluding anybody that isn't them, and at universities
I think there are. Of course
constantly with all kinds of things, and doing worse, spreading all kinds of rumors about them, leaving leaflets on them, making them.
Hold on. Have you read a story about a leftist speaker coming to a major university and being unable to speak because of right-wing protest? You won't find me that case, I don't think. Maybe someone out there might, but I don't think so.
I mean, they're not even probably being invited to the types of universities and places that are dominated by, is Liberty University or these right-wing universities with all white people inviting?
Listen, I refuse to play this game. Legal academia, history departments, political science departments, and English departments don't really matter. I'm not talking about med schools or business schools, of which I'm not saying the same thing. But as to law schools and political science departments and history, the liberal arts, places like Oberlin, places like Duke, places like Hastings, places like Emory, places like Georgia State, all of these places are like 80% liberal progressive in their faculty. And the reason conservative speakers aren't invited that often to those places is because those places, one of the problems we have, which we shouldn't run away from, and I'll be honest, people like Randy Barnett have given me credit for this, is we do have a problem in legal academia, Pete, which is, although the Federalist Society has all the money and all the influence in the political system, liberals run American law schools.
Of course they do.
And they run them.
What do you want to do? Liberals,
I'll
it's
tell you
because,
what I want to
but
do.
I don't understand that. I honestly don't understand that. The reason why liberals are running universities and running law schools is because women and minorities, when included, and it's not just straight white guys and gay people, they're not liberal. They're human beings that are not going to tolerate being minimized, marginalized, and discriminated against. And you're arguing somehow, or I don't know what you're saying, that they're too liberal. They're just human beings that don't want to be denied.
What I am saying
it's not liberal.
Okay, let's summarize this topic very succinctly. We agree that the laws being passed by red states in the last 12 months, dealing with critical race theory, dealing with teaching American history, all of that stuff are pernicious, horrible, unjustifiable, terrible. We agree on that. Now, let's try to understand where they're coming from. First and foremost, they want votes. That's the first thing. Undebated, not a debatable sentence. Second, in addition to wanting votes, they feel, whether they're right or not is not the point of my conversation with you. What these human beings with blood and hearts and brains and sex drives and go to the bathroom, what these human beings feel sincerely, whether they're right or wrong, is the right gets canceled from the education in America much more often than the left.
Their feelings, and you're wrong. And I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Did you say fuck their feelings?
Yes, I'll tell you why you're wrong. This is the only thing that I agree with you is that at the university level, they should do what Yale did and institute a 3-strike rule. Now, by the way, I'm mashing my hands together like I've just cleaned up because that problem is now fixed on every campus across the country. No big deal. Not a huge deal.
It wasn't fixed at Hastings last week.
For you to say that this is just a way to get votes, you're wrong. I'm fighting these people. Hold on.
I didn't say
I'm fighting
these people. They got the word just. It's their main motivation. It's the primary motivation.
I'm telling you that you're not. I don't think that you're in the trenches. I am right now. These people aren't. These people in my town. My town. They're bona fide, ignorant. Folks who do not, they're not voting. Let's be clear. They're not motivated to get votes. They do not want certain things taught.
But they're voting on things or discussing and debating topics that they're debating and discussing. Just yesterday, I had a great phone call with a professor I never met from William and Mary. We're talking about agenda setting and how important agenda setting is in politics generally. The only reason the people in your town who you called ignorant, not me, for the record, the people you called ignorant coming to your town meetings, the reason they're debating these horrific, pernicious things is because other people have set the agenda and their motivation is to get votes.
No. They firmly believe that diversity should not be taught in school. They firmly believe that equity initiatives and inclusion initiatives are minimizing white people. They firmly believe they are the victims. In schools across the country right now, there's a bona fide censorship campaign being conducted by right-leaning conservatives. Call them whatever you want. But they are banning books about the civil rights movement and the Holocaust. They are Christian nationalists, white supremacists that I'm not done. They don't want their kids to learn about the horrors wrought by those ideologies. It isn't about votes. That's what they believe, Eric.
Well, first of all, I need to be careful how I phrase this. So those members of the Georgia legislature who have voted for and will vote for a bill that does some of the things you're describing, that's pernicious.
What about Florida?
Why are they, and Florida and Texas? But I know about Georgia, so I'm going to speak about that, of which I really have almost personal knowledge about. The reason that, so first of all, why are they even debating this? In other words, before you can vote on something in every legislature in the country, there are procedural requirements for a bill to be, come to debate. Okay, so how did these bills come to be on the floor to begin with?
No. We're talking about the issue of free speech and cancel culture. What bills? This is Eric,
What do you mean, what bills?
Wait,
these are laws that are being passed.
The movement of white supremacy, or whatever you want to call them, this has nothing to do with what we've talked about. We haven't mentioned it yet. This is a reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement. This is what this is. That's what they believe. They believe that they're being minimized and marginalized, and that the Black Lives Matter movement is a terrorist movement. They are reacting to that specifically. They're not reacting to somebody get it shouted down on campus. They're reacting because they think their rights are being taken by black people, and that black and brown people and gay people should not be. I mean, do you disagree with that?
I will only answer that question if you let me speak for a few minutes. Can I speak for a few minutes?
Yeah, but I just don't know why you're talking about Bill. I mean, it's just like off topic.
It's not. No,
you're talking about speech issues on campus as being a huge issue, and I'm telling you.
No. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the terrible laws that first were before you get a law, Pete, you get a bill. Before there can be a law, there has to be a bill, and then we vote on the bill, and it becomes a law or it doesn't. You are saying, and I agree with you 100%, or 150%, if that's possible, that in many, many, many red states, including my own, there are laws being passed to restrict how public school teachers, and in some cases, university public school teachers, can teach their subjects. Just so your listeners know, the state is not allowed to tell Emory or a private school how to teach. They can't do that. That's about the First Amendment. But they can tell Georgia State and University of Georgia what they cannot do to a certain point. Now, why are members of the Georgia legislature, both the House and the Senate, in the Georgia legislature, where we have all kinds of problems in the state, why are they spending their time debating bills to prevent my state K through 12 teachers from teaching, quote, divisive topics? And of course, what they mean by divisive is all the things you're railing about. They don't want our kids to learn about slavery and segregation and black codes and all that stuff. Why are they doing that is the question on the table right now. Do not think for 1 second I don't hate all of this, because I do. That's point one. Point two, I agree with you that white supremacy is part of this mix. You agree with me that wanting to get votes is part of this mix. It's a complicated thing.
I don't.
It's not. Well, you're wrong.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. I cover this and I talk to them. I directly talk to them. These people believe. The politicians, just to be clear, the politicians, a ton of them actually believe Black Lives Matter is a terrorist movement and they are being marginalized and minimized. They believe that. It's not just to get votes. That's an old argument. Yes, Mitch McConnell. You're right about the old guard Republicans, but if you haven't been paying attention to the National Republican Party or that at the state level, you're not paying attention. They believe it.
Pete, in Georgia, there is currently a complicated. So Georgia is although we have 2 Democrat senators, and although maybe Stacey Abrams will win the next election for governor, though who knows? Georgia's still obviously a red state in a lot of, and although it went for Biden, it's still outside of Atlanta substantially
because of the way that the districts, right?
So there are all kinds of controversies going on right now about where school district lines are going to be drawn, and where there's a whole succession issue about Buckhead is Atlanta. It used to be Atlanta's toniest part. It's no longer that, but there's a place called Buckhead that's outside of Atlanta that wants to succeed from the city of Atlanta. It's very controversial local politics. Now, Pete, just listen to this sentence. Several things can be true. There are people in the Georgia legislature who are racist. There are all and kind of racist slash I don't want to use white supremacists, but there are racists in the Georgia legislature. There are also people in the Georgia legislature who are going to vote for these laws having nothing to do with race, but having to do with a set of political, unique situations involving district lines and school boards. So, for example, a school board can lose its funding if it violates this new ridiculous law about not teaching divisive subjects. Why is that in there? That's in there for some very specific reasons having nothing to do with racism. That's in there for battles over who controls which schools in the state of Georgia. So these issues are more complicated than you're making them out to be.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No. Wait, I'm sorry. Agreed. They are, and you're making them simple. But
I'm not defending them.
No, what you're doing is you're focused on the smallest part of. We agree they're very complicated. There's all kinds of motivating factors, and there's different populations that we're talking about, and we're conflating them. However, I'm telling you, of all of those factors, the main one is terrified white people.
Well, you're talking to a guy who in the last 12 months has written, I think, 6.
I mean, people
8.
that are afraid all over the world of losing their culture.
Institutional racism in all of our institutions, government, private, social, economic, still runs rampant in America. And I've written like 10 things about that.
Yeah.
And of course, I agree with you. But we started this conversation on a different subject. And what I'm telling you is it's not a justification. You're mixing up justification and description. What I'm telling you, and it's true, because I've talked to some people like this, is one of the many aspects that is driving this phenomenon. And the reason the New York Times wrote an entire, official editorial of the paper on this subject is when high-profile speakers at high-profile schools are shouted down by the left in a way that doesn't let them speak, as opposed to asking really good, hard questions or protesting outside. When the left does that, it is wildly counterproductive. And we can hold both ideas in our head at the same time.
It is fine. But you know what? If one black person attacks a white person and that's caught on video, it creates a huge impact. But we should never give it much attention. And I'm open to being convinced. If I saw data that every day or every week or even every month that there were high profile speakers being shouted down, I would give it a little bit more consideration, but I still wouldn't give it much consideration because I don't care. And the reason why I don't care is because these are students at colleges and these are speakers. How does that affect the vast majority of Americans? What affects the vast majority of Americans, in my opinion, which is how I editorialize about this show, is the issue happening at the Board of Education, where what is happening at your elementary school level, and forget about Texas and Arkansas, New York State. What's happening in blue states with white people? I have no idea why I would spend much time worrying about racists being shouted down at universities. I don't know why that matters more than. And all I'm saying is it matters. It matters. But why are we giving it any attention?
But for the purposes of this conversation, one of the reasons we are giving it attention is because prior to me coming on your show, you asked me about the New York Times op-ed yesterday. And I'm trying, which you looked at as a significant event, or at least something you want Segall to opine on. And yesterday, the New York Times, the most liberal major newspaper in our country, by far, with
certainly their editorial board, I would say,
no close second, wrote an op-ed. Now, Pete, this is them, not me. So don't put these words in my mouth. But it's important enough to discuss because you just said we shouldn't even discuss it. What they said, and the reason why it was so controversial, and I disagree, and you and I both would disagree with them, but what they said, or what they tried to, they didn't say this, what they implied was being shouted down by students at schools or the equivalent is equally bad with the government passing censorship laws. And they're wrong about that. You're correct. The New York Times wrote a terrible op-ed that equated those two things. What's happening in red states, and I guess your school district, across the country, these laws that want to keep the truth away from the American children, is much worse than Ilya Shapiro being shouted down at Hastings and other events like that. You and I agree. It does not mean, though, that Ilya Shapiro being shouted down at Hastings, what happened at Yale, what's happened to that guy D'Souza who shouldn't speak anywhere, but in America we have free speech rights and he's shouted down wherever he goes. Bill Maher was protested at Berkeley, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things, when Bill Maher can't speak at Berkeley, those things don't help. And the proof that it doesn't help, which is the only point I'm making, the proof that it doesn't help is yesterday the fucking New York Times equated Ilya Shapiro being shouted down in Hastings with laws that you and I both hate. That's wrong. That's wrong. But I'm here to tell you there's a connection between the two.
I know
And
there's a
that's all I'm
connection
saying.
between the two.
That's all I'm saying.
But
That's all
there
I'm saying.
is no, but the idea of someone being shouted down versus the all day, everyday sexism and racism.
I agree.
In
We
this
agree.
country, like, I can't even believe
tell the New York Times that, right?
the
Right at the editor.
constant hour to hour indignities all over the place as a result of.
Agreed.
How is there, and laws being passed, how is there any conversation about what's happening on campuses? Because no matter what, here's the thing, and this goes back to media. This is what I know. You say that it's a big deal, and I'm still thinking the reason it's a big deal.
What's the id in that sentence? What's the big deal?
Right-wing speakers being shouted down by, quote, liberals on campuses.
Well, I don't know if I used the word big deal. What I did say,
you said it's not helping.
It's not helping.
You said it's a catalyst.
I'm saying if you want to get in the minds of these other people,
if you want to get in the minds of these other people, all you have to do is listen to 1 hour of right-wing radio.
And they'll say our speakers are being canceled across the country.
I know, but here's the thing. You're saying that this isn't helping, and I'm telling you the reason why is because if you have one thing happen, one incident, the plural of data is, anecdote is not the plural of data, but all you do is Hannity,
Pete, hold on.
Hannity or Tucker Carlson, find that campus speaker.
Stop, my friend. You've got to stop. You're missing the big picture, which is why I started off.
I think you're missing the big picture, and I think you're giving way more attention to the. You're doing what Hannity and Tucker Carlson are doing by blowing up a thing that's not nearly.
You just equated me with Hannity.
Yes, because here's why. Here's why.
Hold on, before you tell me why, let me give you one more story that happened this week. Just this week. I'm not talking about 52 weeks, it didn't happen this week, but it's coming to a head. A professor at a University of Illinois University gave an exam an employment discrimination type exam, involving race. And in this exam, he said, it's like we all give crazy hypothetical. I use Star Trek characters, whatever. And in this exam, an employer is being a complete racist and a complete jerk. And he said the employer called the employee, I'm paraphrasing this, the N word, and he brought out N blank. And he also called the woman a B blank. Okay? He got fired. That is happening all over the country. That is impossibly stupid. And that's done by
a guy got hired. A liberal principal got fired for reading a book to students the other day.
That's terrible.
I don't think that it's nearly as pervasive as you want to make it. And I think that Hannity and Tucker and Segall are finding a thing, and it's not a major thing, and they're making it sound like it's an epidemic. Meanwhile, what all that does is it equates that, whether you mean it or not, in people's thinking to the constant indignities and the laws being passed. That's what it does. You're giving a tremendous amount of attention, in my opinion, to the type of issue or incident that is not as pervasive or as damaging to the ones that I'm dealing with at my local level, which is, why I'm so sensitive about it.
Okay, a couple things. First, I'm trying to pay attention, but my wife just sent me a picture of my child with a guinea pig up their sleeve. But I will stay focused.
They're everywhere. To be fair, they're everywhere.
We now have 5. But
my Lord,
going back,
sir.
So I will try to, and you, in
just
fact,
respond to one thing I said. Segall worse than Hannity. Go ahead.
You are trying. Forget what Segall thinks. Okay, let's just forget and what Dominic thinks. Just for 1 second, just forget what Segall and Dominic think. What the New York Times thinks, which doesn't mean it's right. It could be completely wrong. But what the New York Times thinks is we have a problem in this country revolving around free speech issues, plural. Mm-hmm. Free speech issues, plural. And we need to get a handle on this problem. Now, that's the New York Times. So they think, and you're the one who brought it. You're the one who said, let's talk about the New York Times op-ed. So you obviously think it's a big deal. Now, where I think the New York Times op-ed goes very wrong, and where you and I agree, I think, is what's the biggest problem involving free speech in America today? That's obvious to me. It is racist states and racist school boards making rules to whitewash American history. That's the biggest problem. It doesn't mean
well, I would say there's a bigger problem, which is bills like the one in Florida that minimize and marginalize people who are gay because it makes them want to kill themselves.
Fair. Both of those things are major important problems.
Like the speech where speech becomes the most dangerous issue is when people die.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
That's a major problem. It doesn't mean that we can't hold two ideas in our head at the same time.
We can hold many. You've taught me this many times.
You're not letting me finish. You're not letting me finish. Part of what has fed that problem as a descriptive matter, I'm not making a normative statement, but as a descriptive matter, the changing beliefs among liberal, progressive students at Oberlin, at Duke, at University of Georgia, at University of Arkansas, at the fucking University of Alabama, of all places. The anti-free speech motives of liberals in education, both undergraduate and graduate education in America, is a part of this discussion.
Okay. Yeah, because you're being repetitive.
Because it's wrong.
It's not a new point. It's a small part. And it's not nearly as damaging or effective. It's small part. Go ahead. That's your point. It's a very small part.
It's all part of the same ocean of terrible. It's all part of the same.
It's not the same. It's not because the people that are being affected by it are disproportionately being affected by it. So the white people, the right-wing white people that are affected by it, they're just mad, but they're not losing any rights, opportunities. They're certainly not at risk of dying.
Okay. Andrew Young came to Vanderbilt when I was in law school in 1982.
And they're not losing their vote.
And this is the speech Andrew Young gave. I will rest with Andrew Young. What he said in 1982, who I think is a huge an underrated American.
Mm-hmm.
He stood with MLK. He just spoke at
he's still alive.
Yeah, no. He just spoke at an event my wife hosted at Emory, and he's still amazing. He's an amazing man.
Cool.
He's not perfect. No, none of us are. But he's an amazing American hero. When Andrew Young, and I did not understand this when I was 23 and listening to this. I understand it today. You're going to hate it, but I want you to let me finish.
Well, if he said it, I won't hate it as much as if you said it.
Okay, good. That's why I'm raising Andrew Young. And this is, by the way, has been the theme of his entire career. He said this at Vanderbilt in 1982, but he said this his entire career. The man who stood with Martin Luther King on the Selma Bridge, right? I think he was there with John Lewis and Andrew Young, and Martin Luther King. What Andrew Young said to me, to my class, was we can hold two ideas in our head at the same time. One is the Ku Klux Klan, which in 1982 was a much bigger problem than it is today, is a dangerous organization that, of course, we need to, make sure they don't commit violence. And it is our obligation, he said, both white and blacks, to understand where they're coming from. And where they're coming doesn't justify anything. But to fight them, we have to understand where they're coming from. And where they're coming from is not what you just said. What they're coming from, Andrew Young said, is a position of fear. They are afraid.
I did say that. That's exactly what I said.
Okay.
I said people are, the problem is white people are terrified. The reason they're terrified is because they are being told that there are transgender people hunting them in the bathroom. Of course, that's not true. It has become a major issue.
Fair. And what I'm trying to say to you is
they're being told about a problem that doesn't exist, and they're terrified of it.
You are talking about this issue. I'll be interested to hear the reaction of your listeners. I really will be interested to hear.
They usually agree with you more than me, actually.
Well,
maybe not this time.
What I think you're not listening to yourself is, I'll try to think of it. Okay, Donald Trump, Mike Pence being president would be a real problem for our country, right? We both agree on that. We don't want Mike Pence as president. It's a bigger problem if Donald Trump is president. And what I'm trying to say to you is for the New York Times to devote a huge amount of words to the problem of free speech in America today, and including in their hugely important and influential editorial page several different things, including the horribleness of what you're talking about, but also it's not just speakers being shouted down, Pete. You didn't let me finish earlier. We have a generation of liberals who don't believe in free speech. And that's a real problem for this country, whether you think so or not. Now, I am the lead. I told you this before. If there are 1,200 American constitutional law professors, give or take, I am probably one of 5 who takes a European view of free speech. I am not a free speech absolutist. I would make hate speech illegal. I don't think the First Amendment means what the Supreme Court means. It says it means. Having said all that, I'm committed to allowing robust and free political debate among our citizens.
I do not think that we have a generation of liberals. What we have is we have a lot of young people that don't like racists and sexists and don't want them to speak on their campus.
Okay,
that's what we have. And that is not even remotely. That is not. Stop yelling at me. That is not even remotely equivalent.
Let me give you an example. The law professor in this country most associated with free speech over the last 40 years is a professor named Jeffrey Stone at the University of Chicago. I'll disclose at the outset, he blurred my book, so I want to disclose my bias. Jeff is a legend. He clerked for Justice Brennan a zillion years ago. He's written like 4 books on free speech in the last 7 years. He is a dedicated free speech, almost absolutist. I think he might even call himself an absolutist. He used the N-word in class for most of his career. He is a liberal, Pete. He's a liberal all the way down. He teaches cases where the cases use the N-word. So he wasn't using the N-word, obviously, as an insult or an epithet. He was just quoting cases. He was quoting what judges said. And he got in trouble and in trouble and in trouble. And he stood fast and he said, listen, I'm not using the N-word. I am repeating what the court said about the N-word.
And now, is this going to be just another anecdote?
No, let me finish. He was dedicated to fighting for his right to use the N-word at the most free speech friendly university in the country, the University of Chicago, which you might not be surprised to know because of its, law and economics, markets are everything thing. They believe in total free speech all the way down. 2 years ago, despite having many scandals on this, not changing his mind, he decided to change his mind. And he wrote about it. And he said, all right, I'm no longer going to quote the N-word. Why am I no longer going to quote the N-word, even though I think it's wrong? I think I should be allowed to quote the N-word. But the reason I'm not going to do it is because the fuss that it has created is pedagogically worse than the benefits of using the word, which I think are many, by the way, he said. But nevertheless, I can't do it anymore because it's too disruptive. Which leads me, Pete, to the point you won't let me say, which is not just at Chicago, not just at Georgia State or Hastings or whatever, all over the country. I was on a panel at Emory on this. All over the country, in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of universities, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old college students and 23, 24, and 25-year-old graduate students are basically saying, we want to cancel your speech. You don't get to talk here. You don't get to express these ideas because these ideas are so terrible. Now, I am one of the 5 law professors in the country who might even say at a state school, that's okay. It's not unconstitutional. That's not my point. My point is that phenomenon of not being able to teach rape at the University of Alabama, of a university professor being fired in Illinois for using N blank on his exam, for Eugene Volokh, who is is one of the top law professors in the country, for getting in all kinds of trouble for using the N-word as courts used it at UCLA. All of that is part of this problem. And that's what the New York Times said. Their mistake was they equated the two. I am not equating the two. You are correct. The problem you identify is much worse. But it's all part of the problem. That's the only thing I'm saying. And the fact
you said that so many times, and you yelled at me for not letting you say it. You've literally repeated that the third way with another anecdote. By the way, and by the way, almost all of your anecdotes have been about the N-word. Oh my God, they can't use the N-word anymore.
Rape at Alabama. Can't teach it. The guy at Hastings was not about the N-word.
You can't teach rape at any law school in the country.
I said a woman teaching
How many?
rape told me.
How many would you say?
I don't have the data for
Okay, then. Well, you get back to me with how
but
pervasive this has become in law school, and I will absolutely agree that if you cannot teach rape and what that or any other horrible crime at a number of law schools, like more than 10 or one prestigious one,
more than 10.
I'll say that's a problem.
I bet it's more than 10. I'm sure it's because when I've told this story to other law professors, oh yeah, we've heard about that. Oh yeah, it's happened at our school. Oh yeah, I've stopped doing that too. Pete, I'm being honest here. I really am.
You're being honest about what you know, and I'm telling you, I don't think that what you know, what you're saying, is nearly as pervasive that we spent so much time even talking about it. I just don't. I'm not sure why it's such a huge deal.
Here's another example.
Also, find me, the young liberal progressive leaders. I mean, you keep quoting all these ancient legal law scholars. They're old men.
No. I'm telling you that I was, for example, the
quote a young woman or a young person of color who's a legal scholar that agrees with this. That is also a liberal. I mean, obviously, you're going to find a few unicorns.
Don't get into that conversation because a huge part of critical race theory, which I agree with, and I'm one of the few white professors in the country who agree with this. A big part of critical race theory ideology, Pete, and I think you might agree with this too. A big part of critical race theory ideology is we in America, and I've told you this before on the show, make much too much of free speech. That we value free speech too much. That there are other values like equality and dignity and honor and things like that.
Sure.
And being civilized. And that's a big part of critical race theory. And I agree with that part of critical race theory 100%. And I'm one of the few law professors in America who does. All of that, so all of that can be true. But don't minimize the phenomenon of the New York Times, what you asked me to talk about today, in addition to the charade of next week. The New York Times printing an op-ed that has been almost universally criticized by the left for equating government laws that actually do censor.
Right. We agree. We've talked about that.
Cancel culture.
Yes, we agree about the New York Times article. And we agree that generally speaking, these things shouldn't be equated. If you talk to someone like,
related. They shouldn't be equated, but they're related.
Dahlia Lithwick or Melissa Murray, both of whose work you introduced me to, both of them know, both of them you've disagreed with at times. If they say what you said about law schools having the real concern about teaching rape, I will absolutely think more about it. I don't know, but you're telling me this is an issue based on a few conversations that you had, and yes, at panels, but I don't know. I'm sounding arrogant, but I just haven't heard that much.
I am telling you that one of the reasons that in the last 3 years there's been a spate of books and articles, which I participated in, on this topic, Pete, is the reason why Sasha Volokh, Eugene Volokh's brother, who teaches at Emory, wrote me right before COVID or a few months before COVID and said, Eric, we have a big free speech issue at Emory, blah, blah, blah. Can you come speak on a panel about free speech on university campuses? People had put Trump signs. Trump had written either vote for Trump or don't vote for Trump. I forget, on the Emory campus in chalk, which technically is a violation of the rules. You can't deface, Emory property. But this kind of graffiti had been allowed before. The university erased that. I think it was pro-Trump. The university erased that graffiti when it hadn't erased other graffitis. So, of course, the conservatives went crazy and said, you're canceling us. What I'm trying to tell you, Pete, is that in hundreds, you can believe me or not believe me, we're at the point of diminishing returns. At hundreds, if not thousands, of universities across the country, a new generation of liberals and progressives view free speech very differently than you and your generation.
And I would take them on a case-by-case basis. And if it's about someone saying the N-word, if it's about someone saying black people are unequal to white people, if it's about someone saying that climate change isn't real, if it's about someone preaching anti-vax, if it's about someone making saying the Holocaust didn't exist, if about someone teaching gay conversion therapy. Those are all places where I don't have a huge problem of necessarily having someone's speech drowned out. I don't think you should invite a speaker that is going to tell people not to get vaccinated onto your campus.
Great. So we've reached the point. Good. It took us too long, and you can edit if you want. But we got to the good place. So you just listed like 7 examples of things that have actually happened in the world. Actually, things that have really happened, and you said, "Quote: I have no problem with canceling that speech." I think you said, or
no, I have a problem. I have a problem with inviting an anti-vax speaker. It should the protest should begin at the invitation. The invitation to bring on someone who says the Holocaust didn't happen. Go ahead.
So what you want to do, and now let me be clear. For most law professors, they'd be if we're talking state schools, they'd be talking con law. I'm not talking con law now. I'm talking policy. Okay, so I'm not talking about what judges should do. I'm talking about now what universities should do, administrators, students, etc. Pete, especially the racist, anti-gay, anti-transgender speech that liberals have tried to cancel, and sexist speech that liberals have tried to cancel, that you're saying sometimes you're okay with them canceling it. What I'm telling you as a policy matter, not a legal matter, is, and I've studied this my entire life, I am not sure which is the more effective strategy. Now, it used to be that liberal law professors like me had an absolute answer, which was do not cancel that speech. The remedy for more speech, the remedy for terrible speech is more speech. The remedy for bad speech is the marketplace of ideas. I've never bought into that as a constitutional law matter, which is why I'm an outsider on this issue on con law. But as a policy matter, that might be right. And you want to send this speech underground.
I don't want, no. I don't know. Not true. I agree with you. And I've read, who was it? The former head of the ACLU, Nessen, maybe, who wrote about the laws in Germany.
Nadine Strassen.
I've heard this argument, and I'm not saying which outcome would be actually more effective. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you tell me what should a university do when 4 students want to invite someone onto campus.
But that's not the issue. You're mischaracterizing the problem. Let's take Georgia State, which I know firsthand. We have a fund. Most schools have a fund. We give. So we have a Federalist Society, we have a American Constitution Society, we have a Christian Society, a Jewish Society, all that stuff. And they get a certain amount of university funds. And they're allowed to invite speakers with those funds. And the question you're raising is, what if a student group that gets funds from the university, not private funds, wants to invite a speaker who's going to say horrific things like anti-vax or anti-gay or anti-transgender? And what I'm telling you, Pete, the Supreme Court has said, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, is when a state says to students, here's $500 or $1,000, invite who you want. If a state school then vetoes the student's choice, you're saying at the invitation stage, I think there are 80% of constitutional law professors who say that's a serious First Amendment problem, that state schools are not allowed to pick speakers that way because the First Amendment applies to state universities. Now, I'm a person who says, I'm not sure the First Amendment applies to state universities the way it applies to police or the government or the legislature. I'm just not sure, but I'm a minority on that. But Pete, at the invite stage, it's more complicated than you're saying. What do you do with Georgia State's Federalist Society that has 75 student members or 60 student members that wants to invite a speaker who is going to articulate pernicious views when what we're talking about is the government? Georgia State is the government. You want the government to shut that speaker down?
If, in fact, it's always the case that it's funds from the university, that's one thing. That's
95% of cases.
You think so?
I wrote an article on it.
But here's the thing. To prove the point.
And by the way, there's several Supreme Court cases on this. University of Virginia had a case, again, involving religion, where they didn't want to fund the Christian Legal Society because, strike that. They didn't want to fund a particular newspaper because it was run by students who felt a certain way. And the Supreme Court said, and the Virginia said, we don't want any religious content. They didn't say we like Jews or Christians. There's no religious. And basically the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. You're a state school. You cannot do what the legislature cannot do, which is make viewpoint-based distinctions on speech. So when Federalist Society students at a state school invite a terrible, heinous speaker, for the university to say you can't do that is problematic in many ways. I'm not saying it's impossible.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that that's problematic. And what do you do? What do you do when maybe it's just somebody trying to prove a point? A comedian invites a flat earther, and then people get upset, or invites flat earther's a bad example because there's not that much damage done there. An anti-vaxxer,
right?
Or and
in my opinion, the damage
that's not a great example either, because that's not even a hypothetical.
But this is my point though, because you're talking to me, Eric Segall. To me, I view the benefits of speech versus the harms of speech much different than most American law professors. I don't know if I would allow an anti-vaxxer to spread demonstrably fake and false information about medicine. I don't know if I would do that or not, but Pete, I am a distinct minority there. And once you start drawing, and the problem with my view, my tentative view, it's very tentative, is where do you start drawing lines? Where yes, we agree that demonstrably false medical speech shouldn't be allowed, but that's an easy case on a hard issue. What do we do when we're not quite as certain?
How about this? I found it.
Yeah.
I came up with one that someone's going to use. Mark my words. Someone's going to invite someone, and this isn't a real stance, but they'll do it, that's pro-suicide or homicide. You know, just so somebody shouts them down and they say, see? Anyway, I think what you're saying is all fair and right about outcomes, what the outcome is. I obviously don't agree with the weight that you're giving the issue, and you don't agree with the weight that the New York Times gave the issue, which are different.
I don't agree that cancel culture is a serious. I think the cancel culture should not be equated with red states passing laws banning teachers from teaching the truth about American history.
Yes, one is fascism.
Yes, and one is not. However, that the reasons why Hitler came to power are not irrelevant to Hitler coming to power. And the reasons red states are passing fascist laws are not irrelevant to the discussion about red states passing fascist laws.
No, but the reason...
Fair enough?
Yes, but the reason they're passing fascist laws isn't just a political thing for politicians to use arguments to get elected. It's a right wing, like everything else in America. That's a problem.
It's politics.
It's a right wing media driven narrative, and we did not have this problem at this level when you didn't have the Rush Limbaughs and now the Alex Jones and the Tucker Carlsons
or the internet,
the internet, which you're right to say amplifies all of them.
So I wrote a law review article called "The Internet as a Game Changer," the thesis of which was free speech law has not caught up to the internet.
I fully agree with that, but I actually at this point don't think that that's very controversial amongst experts, is it?
It's wildly controversial.
Is it really
very few law professors agree with
that the laws have not caught up with the internet when it comes to speech?
No. What they say is free speech applies just as much to. Let me give you the perfect example, then we should call this off.
All right.
Talking for 6 hours. So the whole January 6th thing, it's a big issue, obviously. When is political speech in the public square or any place protected expression, and when is it incitement to violence, right? And the Supreme Court has a rule about that, which is for speech to be legally unprotected as incitement to violence, it has to be intended to result in violence, and there has to be a strong likelihood that violence will imminently occur. And that's the law of the country right now, today. That is the binding law of the land today. What I wrote is the imminency requirement needs to go. That needs to go away. That's not caught up to the internet. Because if you are a doctor, for example, and someone said, and you perform abortions, and someone says, I'm going to kill you on Monday. Okay, that's clearly not protected speech. You can't say that. You can't say, I'm going to come to your house and kill you on Monday. You'll get arrested for that. And that's constitutional to arrest you for that. Under the test as it currently is, if I say, you're a doctor, you kill babies, I am going to come get you one of these days, or I'm going to come get you sometime between now and 2045, that would be protected speech, probably, under the Brandenburg test I just gave you. But with the advent of the internet, the imminency requirement makes no sense, because I'd rather be told I'm going to be killed on Monday than I may be killed any time between now and 5 years from now, right? Obviously, we all would rather have
No, I mean, Mondays don't work for me.
Fair enough. My point here is that free speech doctrine that there has to be an imminency to the incitement, I think is obsolete and needs to go away. But I have presented that idea at numerous conferences and have written an article on it. I've yet to find, there are very few law professors who agree with me. Because, this goes back to critical race theory, because in America, we elevate free speech to levels of importance that drown out the egalitarian concerns you've been talking about for 2 hours, of equality, of dignity, of not treating transgender folks and gay folks and other folks like, not worthy human beings. I think values of equality should trump free speech at some moments in time, but very few people think
well,
that.
you have me convinced, but I'd love to hear the arguments here, as you always generally do have me convinced, because you make such a good argument. You often make the other arguments well as well, which is why I think people value hearing from you, certainly in this format. But I mean,
all I really want to say I want to punctuate this with, Pete, is what red states are doing is so dangerous and so terrible and so awful. And what the students did at Hastings and in Chicago and in Alabama and at Emory and at other places across the is not as bad. I'm not saying it's anywhere near as bad, but it's bad too.
All right. And that's the point that I want people to maybe respond to, if they do, about this conversation. Because I think even including it in the conversation is bad, maybe. Like the comparison with the damage being done is, I don't know.
I'm not comparing. I'm talking about what led to where we are today.
I know, but it's like, to me, it's like causes of death. What's most likely? And if we're talking about some rare disease versus heart disease, I think we probably shouldn't be talking so much about the rare disease. Yeah, it's bad. It'll kill you. But you named 5 universities, and I'm telling you, every state in the country.
Well, that's interesting, because my friend, epidemiologist expert who helped invent the meningitis vaccine, said to me while that was going on years ago, when he was trying to get that patented, when FDA approval and all that stuff, the reason why meningitis vaccines didn't come earlier was because the government's argument was, don't put money into this, because it's very rare. Meningitis is actually fairly rare.
Well,
let me finish. My friend's argument, which won eventually, was, you're right, it is rare. I can't disprove that. The data shows that. But when it hits, it wipes out family. In other words, meningitis is it's like ALS. It's such a horrific thing that the numbers do not reflect the importance of coming up with a vaccine to fight this. What I'm trying to tell you, my young friend, is I agree with you that what happened at Hastings and what's happening in Alabama and what's happening in Illinois and what's happening with Eugene Volokh at UCLA and Jeff Stone at Chicago, that's 5 examples, top of my head. I could give you, I'm sure there are hundreds of others. It's not as bad as the other thing, but Pete, it's bad and it's contributing to it. It is contributing to it. It is. Every time someone like Elias Shapiro gets shouted down so he can't even speak, he can't even talk, he can't even express what I think are horrific views. Every time that happens, another piece of energy goes to a red state to pass the fascist
laws. And every
laws.
time that we give it oxygen, it just becomes more of an issue.
Well, let's crowdsource that. See what happens. I'm not sure you're right about that.
I'm not sure I'm right about it either.
Because for someone like Jeff Stone, who really he's like 77 years old.
By the way, I also think that the crowdsourcing the opinions are going to fall fall fairly accurately down lines of people who are more threatened by that type of speech other than others. I mean, you're going to have white straight guys more likely to argue with or agree with your argument, and you're going to have women and minorities more likely to agree with what I'm saying.
What I've been unsuccessful in conveying is the following. When I tell you that I think the Hastings students or the Alabama students or the UCLA students are doing a real disservice to our country by shouting down a speaker or by trying to cancel people with certain views or by being overly sensitive to things. When I say things like that, Pete, you're talking to someone who believes less in free speech than most people. So I get some credibility. It would be like if I was criticizing Billy Joel. If I come on your show and I say, God damn it, Billy Joel did this thing and it's awful. I get more credibility than the average bearer because everyone knows I fucking love his music. When I tell you that I think there's a free speech problem in American universities, what I'm also telling you is I am on record in my professional capacity as being less a believer in free speech than 95%, maybe 99% of American law professors.
I'm telling you that I could name a less threatening issue that will soon probably be pervasive and being debated all over the country, which is cameras in the classrooms to watch what the teachers are teaching. No, that's what we're debating, Eric. And you're talking about some speaker being shouted down, and I'm talking about teachers not being able to feel comfortable in the classroom and leaving the profession because of a huge movement of overwhelmingly white folks who are terrified, they're fascists. They're fascists.
And that's why and that's why I agree. Well said. Beautifully said. If anyone's still listening after the last 2 hours, beautifully said. And that's why the New York Times editorial yesterday is so problematic, because it equates those two things. I'm not equating them, Pete. I want to be very clear. I'm not equating students shouting down Shapiro at Hastings.
I just got an email from a listener that says Segall is worse than Tucker Carlson. And this interview isn't even out yet. It's the kind of thing I do miss the live radio feedback that we would get.
I know.
We should do more. We should have done this live. That would have been great because there could have been a lot more voices.
Except I'm looking out my window and it's 60 degrees in Atlanta and sunny, and no one's going to be listening. But they might tomorrow.
At another time. Well, maybe we should.
I never do this on your show, but can I plug something real quick?
Yeah, you can plug it. But just what do you think of maybe after for those of folks that stayed for this whole interview and thought it was. I might have made any good points, for God's sake, and I didn't sound like a complete arrogant prick talking to a legal scholar. Then join us on Thursday night. Maybe Segall will stop by this or some other time, and you can come in. It'll be funny for people to come in, especially and just pound me.
Well, I can definitely. I love joining you on. I join you whenever I can on Thursday nights because I love that experience. I do have a standing commitment on most Thursday nights, which makes it difficult. Which is why
we'll just make a special time for this conversation. We spent an hour and a half. It'd be great to get other voices. There's a lot of probably people who are frustrated or annoyed by some of the things I said or you said. Maybe.
This will be released on Monday.
I might release it over the weekend just as a special. Okay. I don't know.
So whenever it's released, I do want to change subjects just a little bit and mention that after 31 years as a law professor, not saying something I've been wanting to say for a long time. On Monday morning on Dorf on Law, I am going to say it tentatively because it's a very big idea. My blog post on Monday morning is maybe it's time to seriously talk about disobeying the United States Supreme Court, and I believe it. I don't want to talk about it until people read the blog post.
Okay.
I think it is time for people to seriously consider that we just disobey the Supreme Court.
And you're going to also be supporting the purge.
I'm not supporting the purge.
Sounds like you are.
But I am supporting disobeying the Supreme Court.
I'm hearing pro-purge. And Hannity.
Thank you.
I know you have to go.
I may or may not forgive you for the Hannity call.
You have an appearance. I know you have an appearance on Hannity coming up. I will let you go. It's just Segall going.
That's a joke, people. He's just joking about that.
It's just Segall going, you and I, Sean, disagree on everything, but this one thing.
I don't agree with him on anything except what students at Hastings should have done, what Hastings Law School should have done is what Yale did. Scream for 5 minutes.
No, I do. I do think that's a really important point, and I'm glad that for this conversation alone that I agree that it's a problem to censor speakers. I agree that's a problem. I'm just saying I think it's just like so not a
segment ever. I've known you for 10 years. This is our longest segment ever, except for when I co-hosted your show. But
well, it's probably only because, and honestly, I'm so passionate about what's happening in my school district, and I'm so frustrated with hearing certain arguments be given more attention and being what I think somewhat flawed.
Well, Pete, I'm very serious about this, and I'll make this public. I'll make this offer publicly. You can edit this out if you want. Write a letter to the Times, and I'll look at it and help you write it. Say that. Say you are currently involved in a dispute in New York, in your own fucking state. I don't use the word fuck. And what you New York Times guys, are equating two things that should not be equated, because one is a dire threat to our country, and one is bad, but not so much a dire threat.
I'll consider that. I have a lot of free time. I'm a really good writer.
You are actually. You're an underrated writer.
Terrible writer.
And no, you're not.
I don't know the difference. I don't know the difference between then and than. I don't. I don't know how commas work.
Years ago, it was very good.
That was helped. I was helped.
I'll help you with this too. Write it.
All right. Thank you very much. And we will allow people to. We'll find a time and we'll choose an agreed upon time. We'll do a Zoom and we'll allow people come in and bust chops.
Yes.
Anything,
I think that'd be great.
Including stylistic.
How about the fact that I have in my house right now 1 bird, 2 dogs, 5 guinea pigs?
I hope you know where the closest animal hospital is.
Bye, my friend.
All right, buddy. Love you. Bye. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Oh my God, I can't even believe you're still listening. It's a 3-hour conversation today. I don't blame you for turning it off, and that would mean you're not hearing me now. But if you're still listening, you win the big award, folks, for putting up with that. I hope you appreciated it. If you didn't, write me a letter, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And if you're more annoyed with him, which I doubt, you can write that and I'll forward it to Eric. Or tweet us both. @eSpin Segall, @Pete Dominic. That was my Saturday morning. Segall and I hope you appreciated it. And if you didn't, I'm sorry. I love you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening today. Standupwithpete.com to sign up for a paid subscription. John Carroll, take us out, baby.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. While you lying awake wondering where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can can see them flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, all right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand